What I would like to speak about today is this whole subject about which I have just completed a book titled Manifest Your Destiny, the 9 Spiritual Principles for Getting Whatever You Want. And when I set out to write it, I experienced a little more doubt than I really like to admit to, since I've written about how to banish doubt in our lives and to create that knowing within. And yet I was moving in a direction in my life that I didn't even know if I was qualified to write about or capable of producing anything in this area. And it's like my friend Susan Jeffers has a title of a book that I've always liked that says, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I must admit to feeling a bit of just anxiousness about taking on this subject. Before I wrote Your Sacred Self and Real Magic and You'll See It When You Believe It, all of which were books that sort of got me off of the path that I had been on, which is, if you followed my works over the past couple of decades, you have seen a shift, a transformation, a movement away from focusing on managing your emotions and being psychologically more sound and more centered and not being victimized and all of these kinds of things that are very useful and helpful, I believe. But when you start out and get on this path, things begin to happen in your life. And there were shifts that were taking place. And they started for me when I actually sat down to write Gifts from Icus, which is a novel, a parable that I wrote 15, 18 years ago. And it was really a joke. It was really I was just writing a little funny satire. I started out as a satire. It was based upon a story that I had conceived in my mind of another place, a place where people would be neurotic like we are, except that they had to be because their reality dictated that. And I created this, and it was all for this one, it was a punchline. And the punchline was going to be the last line of the book. And I'll tell you what that punchline was in a moment. And the planet was Uranus, and the place, the woman that was on this planet was, name was Icus, which was just my daughter who had just been born, who is now 15. Her name is Sky. Her name spelled backwards, which is Icus, E-Y-K-I-S. Only I just added in there. And a visitor just went to this planet and saw that they turned on the TV, and there was this woman newscaster, her name was Icus, who was giving the anxiety attack report for the weekend right after the weather. You know, like after the storms come in and you have to prepare for that, she'd say, anxiety will be coming in, you know, and get out your Valium, get out your Librium, because there'll be heavy doses of anxiety coming in on the weekends. And this was a place where anxiety really did attack. And so people had anxiety attacks. And I did this whole thing on guilt is something that you have to have on this planet because it allows you, when you get so much of it, to go into rewind, and then you get to do it over, and so guilt sends you back and gets you to do things over. And then this lady, Icus, this divine being, comes to Earth, and of course she can't figure out why people are neurotic by choice when anxiety doesn't really attack. And being guilty doesn't allow you to go into rewind, and all of these things. And it was just sort of my little satire, just another way of presenting the message. And this is what really got me started on this path. And then she goes back to Uranus, but before she goes, she leaves with the secrets of the universe, these great secrets. And there are 17 of them, and I wrote about each one of them. And she says, as she is leaving, you have a choice to either adopt these and make your world work, or to to live the neurotic life that you're continuing. And then I was going to summarize the book, and I was going to call the book, the title of which was going to be that last punchline, which was, if you want to be happy, get your head out of Uranus, which... And I had a wonderful picture for the cover of the book. I had a drawing. I had a yoga master who had posed for it, and it was And that was my idea, and it was really just sort of a joke, just a fun thing that I was going to do. And it turned out that people bought it, and it was very successful, and everybody took it very seriously. And so after that, I got into this area of, I had written a book about raising children, and then I began to look at my own life in a kind of a different way, and where I was going, what I wanted for myself, and what was happening in my relationships and so on. And I wrote this book called You'll See It When You Believe It. And I couldn't get it published. I mean, I had written books that had all been huge bestsellers, and publishers were always anxious to take anything that I had written and so on. And yet my publisher, when they read that, they said, no, this is not a direction that we're going in. This is not something that the world is going to accept. It's too far out there. It's too weird. And so I went to a different publisher. And I changed publishers, went to William Morrow. And I did it without an advance, which is probably not a big deal to you, but when you've got 8 kids, it's a very big deal, and this is how you make a living. And paid for it all myself and put the whole thing together. And then they got behind it. I had a wonderful editor. And then that really got me going on this journey of looking at these principles, these spiritual principles that this church stands for and has stood for as long as I have been associated with it, which goes back to 1975, when it was just a little classroom over on the east side of Detroit at Regina High School, when Jack asked me if he could make a tape series based upon your erroneous sounds, which a lot of people thought was a sex book. To write, You'll See It When You Believe It. He wanted me to write a sex book, and a lot of people thought I already had done that, with erroneous sounds. And I remember going into a bookstore in Des Moines, Iowa, and seeing my picture in that little paperback in the middle of all the rest of the pornographic books. And this whole section of books, Do Me, Do Me, Do Me, and Debbie Does Dallas, and The Pizza Man Always Delivers, I think, was one. And there was my little face and your erroneous sounds right in the middle of all of that. But I didn't want to write that, and I didn't want to write a business book, and I didn't want to write a diet book. I wanted to have my writing reflect what was happening with me in my life. And that was, of course, followed by Real Magic, which was sort of taking on this idea of being able to create miracles in our lives. And then Your Sacred Self, which was really my effort to write about the triumph of the higher or the sacred part of us over the ego. And I'll talk somewhat about that today. But then, of course, the question always is for the left brain and for the ego part of us, what's next? Where are you going? What are you going to do now? Are you going to retire? Are you going to stop writing? Have you said everything that you know? And so on. And then magical things always seem to happen when you let go and you let God into your life, and you stop questioning, and you stop demanding, and you stop insisting, and you surrender. And in this process of doing that, whatever it is that you need to do on your journey will become very evident to you, and the right people will start to show up, and the right things will be there for you, and the financing will be there, and all of that seems to work. And in the process of preparing for Your Sacred Self, I read some spiritual literature. I immersed myself in A Course in Miracles, and I read Madame Blavatsky, who was very influential for a lot of writers of the 20th century. A Russian lady who lived in the last century predicted that there would be an incredibly revolutionary experience, a revolution, if you will, on the planet that would transcend any of the revolutions that had ever occurred before. It would make the agricultural revolution and the Renaissance and the industrial revolution and even the technological and informational revolution, all of which she predicted, dwarfed by comparison with this spiritual revolution that would be ushered in the last 25 years of the millennium and in the first 11 years of the next millennium, is what she said in the Secret Doctrine. And she said the leaders of this revolution would not be people in power, but indeed would come out of the masses. They would be school teachers, they would be singers, they would be dancers, they would be physicians, they would be attorneys, they would be lawyers and people who just regular folks, cab drivers, whatever, who would, and the groundswell would come from within, and then the leadership would begin to get it, rather than the other way around. And that, I think about that and what Madame Blavatsky said when I read this, and when I wrote Erroneous Zones in 1975, I had never heard of Madame Blavatsky, nor read any of her work. And I thought about the changes, the shifts that have taken place on the planet. And I don't want to take the time to go into all of them, but the dismantling of the Soviet Union and apartheid and all of the kinds of changes, the really dramatic changes that I've talked about here before, which if anybody would have tried to predict 10 or 15 years ago, they would have been laughed at. That there would be a man in prison and who would probably become the man of the century in South Africa, who wasn't even allowed to be photographed and had no visitors for over a quarter of a century. And he would not only be released, but he would become the democratically elected president of a black-white coalition government in South Africa. Just absolutely unheard of. And this was just like a speck ago. This is just a moment ago. Because one of the great teachings, I think, that we have to understand in our own lives and collectively is that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And when that idea is there and it's present and it's fluid and it's allowed to flow, then nothing can stop it. And then I take a look at these changes in reading her work. I think about who have been the spokespeople. I'm always amused in election years when the people who are running for the higher offices proclaim themselves to be our leaders and act as if they really are the ones who are leading us. And I am, and all the commercials are a leader for our times, and this is the person that's leading us. And I always wonder where they ever got the idea that they were the leaders, because they just happened to be in an elective office. It's sort of like if you had a nice home and you had people that you hired to come in and help you out with it and take care of it, and you paid them to do that, and you just said, look, you're our servants. Take care of our home, and I don't want to bother with all of these finances over here. So here's the money, and you take care of this and make sure that everything is running okay. And then after a while, they said, well, we need more of your money, and we're not going to give any of it back to you. And you said, wait a minute, this is my money. And the servant said to you, no, we're going to tell you what you can do with it. And all of a sudden, there's like this whole shifting around taking place in your house, and you're out there working and doing all of the things to make the house work, and you got these other people who you're giving your money to telling you that they're your leaders. And there's like this twisting around of what leadership really is. When you think of the revolution that took place in ancient Greece, who were the leaders of the democratic revolution in Greece? Were they the elected officials? Or who do you think of when you think of Greece? You think of Aristotle, don't you? Don't you think of Socrates? You think of and Plato and the people who wrote down the Hippocrates? I mean, these were not people who were elected to office. I mean, do you look up who was the president of Greece? And who were the leaders of the Renaissance? The leaders of the Renaissance were the Da Vinci's, the De Medicis, the artists, the artisans, the people who were expressing the value of the human spirit in their writing and in their work and in their inventions and so on. The leaders weren't the people who were running for office, who were passing rules. And this whole idea of who the leaders are on the planet today. See, it's like the real leadership shift is going to be in the consciousness that is in here. And there's an awful lot of people, when you go back to 15, 20, 30 years ago, and look at the kinds of changes that were taking place, just like simple little changes, like young men letting their hair grow a little longer, or starting to put an earring in their ear, and things like this. And remember the outrage. I mean, how people were just so freaked out over, oh my God, they've got hair growing over their ear. I'm very sensitive to this issue, And they're going to wear an earring, and they're going to get a tattoo, or they're going, these were things that we were just so. And now, the same people that were so obsessed with that and so concerned with that, today, they were called. These were sissies. These guys who let their hair grow a little bit long. Remember? And now you watch the National Football League, and these burly mastodons of masculinity have their hair underneath their helmet, and they got earrings and so on. And it's like it's the same thing with the consciousness that this afternoon's seminar is about. It's like the people, the rest of the people, you are the leaders. The consciousness is the leader. And the rest of the people will begin to follow and come along this road, along this path, once we get it paved. But right now it's bumpy. And it's got pebbles on it, and it's a little bit painful and a little bit difficult. And it's a big part of what I want to share with you and talk to you about today. It's like if you want to make the changes in your life that are going to create a higher level of awareness in you, you've got to really, what I call, you've got to leave the tribe. You've got to get out of the tribe. You got to leave tribal consciousness behind, and the tribe is really nothing that you should be angry about. The tribe has been very supportive, helpful in your development, but the tribe is like your immediate family and your extended family and your communities and your organizations, your educational organizations, your religious organizations, your whatever it is, these groups that you're a member of by just the virtue of the fact that you showed up in them. And the question of whether you're going to evolve is not really the issue, because the tribe will evolve. Tribes do evolve. We have our tribe as a people. We have come to a recognition about things like racial inequities, slavery. I mean, it's taken a long time, and there's still a lot of work to do. But there's a recognition that this is just not the way to go, and we're not going to behave this way. And there was an awful lot of people who sacrificed a lot along that path. The shifts away from, for example, world wars as a way of solving our disputes. I mean, the tribe has ultimately come to a conclusion that this isn't going to work anymore. I mean, these things that we have building, these weapons that we're building and aiming at each other, if we ever fire one, we're going to kill ourselves. So we can't even use the weapons that we've created because we all breathe the same air. And the winds will blow back the same toxic stuff we put into the atmosphere that we're aiming at someone else. So we've come to, so the tribe will come, and even with nuclear weapons. I mean, when I first started speaking on this stage, and it's about let's build more and more weapons. I often ask audiences, is there anybody in Russia that you don't like? Is there anybody in the Soviet Union that you really hate? Some commie grandmother over there that just really bugs you, with tennis shoes on, who's got signs that they're protesting or whatever. We spent something like 30% of our gross national product for almost 30 years to build weapons aimed at all of these people. And every audience I've ever asked the question, is there anybody in the Soviet Union that you hate? Nobody's ever raised a hand. So we spent $3 or $4 trillion of all of our gross national product to build weapons to aim at people that nobody dislikes. It's an insane kind of thing that we've allowed to take. It's because we've let the servants, take over and let them believe that they're leaders. And they say, look, they're dangerous. They're going to come after you. This is really bad. These guys are, And the problem is, of course, that we haven't learned to love each other. We haven't understood what the Sioux Indians meant when they said that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. And once we get that and know that the tree would collapse were it to have its branches fighting among itself, and that we are all just buds on a tree called humanity. And we're moving in that direction. I mean, we used to talk about how can we build more nuclear weapons, and now we're talking about how can we get rid of them. I mean, but What I'm saying to you is the tribe will evolve at a certain pace. And the question isn't whether you're going to evolve. You will evolve. The question is, at what speed are you going to evolve? If you choose to evolve with the tribe, then you have made a choice to do it very, 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 very slowly. And if you want to turn left, and all you want to do is turn left, but the tribe is heading straight or turning right, you're not going to be able to do it. You see, because the mantra of the tribe is, but what will they think? But what will they think? And you have to learn in order to enter into this new territory, this territory of being able to become a manifester in your life, which is what the theme of this seminar is about. Learning to manifest, to be able to place your attention on what it is that you would like to attract and have show up in your life, and know within that it will. To be able to take on the teachings that Jesus talked about in the New Testament through St. John, that even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things, that you have within you this phenomenal power, and it's not something that's external to you, it's something that is within you, and that you can create a knowing about that. So I just always have this sort of imaginary conversation with the tribe, with my tribe, in which you finally have this recognition. When I talked to Dr. Maslow back in 1968 and asked him the question, what do you mean by self-actualization? And he said, all you have to do, Wayne, is learn to become independent of the good opinion of other people, and you'll have it. This is what they're like. This is how they're different from the rest of us, is that they are independent of the good opinion of other people. And if you get that down, and I always have an imaginary conversation with the tribe, in which I go to them and say, I have finally figured out what I need to do to actualize myself and to fulfill my purpose and to fulfill my divine mission and why I am here, my heroic mission, to express the spirituality that is within me, to express the God force that is within me, rather than this physicalness that I represent. But I am something much grander than that. And so what I've learned, member of the tribe, is that I have to become my individual, and I have to honor what you have taught me, but I have to leave you behind. And I have to go my own direction, and I know that's not going to sit well with the rest of you, but it doesn't make any difference, because I now know that I have to listen to that inner voice. And even though you're all turning left, I got to make a right turn. And imagine this meeting of the tribal elders hearing this little conversation that you have just laid on them. And what do they say? How do they respond? No way. The purpose of the tribe is to keep you in part of the unit and to keep you from having such crazy ideas, because the tribe cannot survive without you. So it's like what you have to do is leave the tribe. And now I have left the tribe. I've been out of the tribe for 40 years almost. Truly, I have. But everybody in the tribe thinks I'm in the tribe. They do. There's not one person in my tribe, whether it's my individual family or extended family, who thinks that I'm not a member. They think that I'm really right with it. But I have nothing to do with the tribe. In consciousness and my awareness, I know that the rest of the tribe doesn't know a thing about turning right. They're not ready to turn right. When they come to a fork in the road, as Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And when they go the path that is most familiar, the one that is paved. And going in the unpaved path is not something that... So it's like tribal consciousness is something that is very important for you to... A seminar this day is about this idea of manifesting your destiny and coming to a inner kind of awareness that I have within me this power to do that, to actualize. And everything that Jesus said they're capable of doing in ourselves, I am capable of doing. And I am leading into that. By the time we're finished, hopefully you will have a kind of an idea of how to go about making that happen. I will be talking about what I consider these. But before I get into them, I'm going to share with you the state of mind that I was in when it seemed to me that it was obvious that I was going to now begin writing about this idea of being able to experience what they call in India, what they call in Hindi, Siddhi consciousness. S-I-D-D-H-I, Siddhi consciousness. Siddhi consciousness is a consciousness that you can reach, a state you can reach in your life, in which that there is no time lag between the having of the experience of having a thought and that the manifestation of that into the physical world. That's what Siddhi consciousness is. In other words, it's what, and in the West, it's called Christ consciousness, which is a consciousness in which is described in the Bible as the gift of the ability to feed the hungry from your consciousness, the ability to manifest food, because the awareness of being able to heal, for example, is stronger than the awareness within those who are hungry that they can't be fed. And the power, that internal knowing, becomes so powerful in certain individuals that they can literally shift around and change the rules. Like if I divide the stage for the rest of the day, wherein everything on my right represents the physical world, the world of matter, the stuff that we can experience and see with our senses. That's all over here. And over here to my left represents the world that is the cause of this over here. The force that is in us, that is invisible, that everything that is in this physical world that we see and observe and notice has boundaries and certain experiences and expressions of matter and rules, beginnings and ends, boundaries, laws of motion, laws of gravity, all the stuff that we learn in school is over here. And over here is that invisible divine force. Something is over here that allows this to be this. And these rules over here in this, what we call the spiritual dimension, or the invisible or the unseen dimension, are so strong and so powerful that if you embrace them and come to know them and begin to live them, they can alter the rules over here. They can literally shift these rules around and circumvent them. And I'll talk more about that very shortly. This idea of having within you this ability to go into this world over here and create this Christ consciousness, or this Siddhi consciousness, is one in which you no longer have forfeited your ability to oscillate back and forth between these two worlds. For most of us, it's because our body is really anchored, and our life is anchored over here. And felt, after he read it, that I was a person in the West who could teach this manifesting technique, which we have put out into this CD that Guy was talking about, called Meditations for Manifesting. And it's a meditation practice that you do each and every day, morning and night. And I'll explain it a little bit at the end. Maybe we'll even do a few moments of it for those of you who aren't familiar with it. But what he said to me in this tape and in this letter was, do it. Do it for 15 days. Just practice this meditation and banish and get rid of all of the doubt that you have. And I get tapes like this all the time. I get people sending me, all kinds of stuff. Stick a crystal in your ear, and something great will happen, and other places and other things. I mean, it's I get lots and lots of this stuff. But this wasn't like that, and I listened to it, and I took it home, and my wife and I did it. We went together, and each talked to other people, friends, about it, and so on. And these wonderful, strange things began to just show up. And I thought, this has something to do with where I'm going, And what it really involves is having this is church, Wayne, having the chutzpah to go within and feel that, perhaps the fear that the ego says not able of doing this because we and God are separate from each other. It has to do that in order for it to survive, because the ego's greatest fear is that you'll come to know God and realize that you are God. And God is within you. Define ego as edging God out, EGO, edging God out. And I think it's really a good acronym because it really thrives, this idea, but on believing that you and God are separate. And when I read this information, I began to listen to it, and I thought, I have within me, according to all that I have read, I have within me this power to heal myself and others. And I have within me I mean, I don't really believe that doctors heal people. You know, I mean, you cut your hand and you watch it, and you don't need a doctor to heal it. You just have to watch it, and your nature heals it. Your very essence heals it. It just closes up, and before long, a scab forms. No scab person has to come in and put one on. You know, it just starts healing, and then the scab falls away. And the body is the hero. I mean, and this force, this universal force that's in there is the hero. And so it's like you have that within you, the healing capacity. You've healed yourself thousands of times with all of the little wounds and so on. The reason that most people don't heal in their lives is because they're bonded to their wounds of their past. You know, so you hang on to these wounds that are back here, and you lead with them, and you remind everybody about how horrible your life was, and that you're an alcoholic, and that you're the child of abuse, and that you're a victim of incest, a survivor, and that you lived in an orphanage, and that your father was an alcoholic, and that your mother liked your sister better, and that you got a million. There's a million of them. I got a million of them. Everybody's got a million of them, you know. And we lead with them. And whenever anybody doesn't pay enough attention to us, whenever our ego gets really worked up and we feel that our self-importance isn't being acknowledged by enough people, we just haul it out. We haul out our wounds. But how can you talk to me like this? Don't you know what I am and what I've been through? And very often I'll meet people, and within 10 minutes of being in their company, I know about all of the horrors of their life. And they wonder why they don't heal. Because your biography, of course, becomes your biology, becomes the cell tissue of your life. And if you hang on to this stuff over here, it's like if you had a wound, you cut your hand and you had a wound, and that wound didn't close. You wouldn't let it close. Every time it tried to close, you opened it. No, you ain't closed. No way. I'm keeping you right here. Well, this is something I can really use. I got a lot of power. And you just kept opening this thing, you know. Your body would die. It would just get infected and it would die. Because your nature says, close the wounds. Except when it comes to the wounds of our past, which we understand make us stronger. And are things we had to go through in order to get here today. So we hang on to these things. And one of the wounds that we hang on to is this idea that somehow I am not trustworthy, I am not valuable, I am a sinner, I am evil at my core, I am not really a genius, I am not capable, I do not have God within me, I don't have esteem, I'm not valuable. And we hang on to this idea, and then when the time comes for us to really, when we have the opportunity presented to us to really move in another direction and to make the changes, we haul out our wounds. And we not only keep ourselves from moving towards this highest level of awareness that I'll be talking about later on, but it also keeps us in a pattern of self-abuse, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. It keeps us stuck back there with things like addictions, with things like depressions, with things like arthritis, with things like heart disease, with things like compulsive eating disorder, with things, like anxiety, and so on. All of this stuff that we think is just stuff that happens to us. And we don't really ever stop and say, thank you for all of this. We don't do that. And so these opportunities present us this idea of learning to leave the tribe and to not go along and to not do what is expected of you by all of the rest of the people. You have to be willing, when you talk about self-actualizers, when you talk about people who reach this highest level, and it is, make no mistake about it, it is at this highest level that goes beyond just merely surviving and just taking care of your bills and just functioning and doing all the things that you do in your life. I would suggest that of all the people that are here today, and it looks like 1,000 or so here today, I would suggest that all of you wouldn't come here and spend a Saturday afternoon if you didn't have inside of you some kind of a knowing that there is a deeper and a richer experience of life available to you and to all of us, and that this might just be something that is going to help me to actualize that. That you know this. You may not be sure of exactly what path or how to go about doing it, but you vote when you come to something like this. or any of the people that come here to the church. I mean, the top people in the spiritual revolution. And what do you think this spiritual revolution is about? I mean, I was a school teacher. Marianne Williamson was a singer, a lounge singer. Louise Hay was a dancer. Deepak Chopra was a physician. Bernie Siegel was a physician. Larry Dossey is a physician. Og Mandino was a salesman. These people are people who came up from here rather than having it imposed down here. And creating this kind of an inner awareness that you are not going to be stuck as a member of the tribe really means letting go of all that you have attached yourself to as what it is that is important for you. It means taking an eraser, if you will, almost to that past. See, often we think that we know, and I've talked before about the difference between what you believe and what you know. If I had managed to gather the 1,000 people in the metropolitan Detroit area today on Saturday afternoon who had never seen a bicycle before, and got you all here, and you'd never seen this thing, and I put it up here on the stage, and I were to show you this thing and say to you, okay, I know this looks weird, but this is a form of transportation. And you see that little seat? And you see your seat? And you see those little wheels? And you're going to get on that thing. And you're going to pedal it. And it's not going to fall over. And you're going to balance yourself, and it's going to really improve your mobility in your life. You would all go, wait a second, hold it, 1 second. I can't get on that thing. That thing isn't going to get me around. And if I brought in all kinds of people from behind here to testify, I love that, especially in church. Testify. And they all testified and told you how great this new way of moving about the planet was and how great this was, and you can all do it. Yes, absolutely, you can do it. And then I brought in a whole group of people to get on that thing and ride it around, and I showed you movies of it, and I gave you a lecture on the laws of motion and balance that allow you to do it. And then I got it on myself, and I rode around the room on it, and then I put it here. I said, okay, one at a time. Come on, get on this thing and ride it. You would approach it always with an element of doubt until you had the conscious contact or the direct experience of it, in which then you would have a knowing. So when I speak of knowings and beliefs, I'm speaking about the difference between having doubt and not having it. And when you have a knowing about something, that knowing becomes so strong that all doubt has been banished. And as it says in the Course, I think probably the most quoted piece in the Course in Miracles says, if you knew, not if you believed, but if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear again. If you knew it, which means it's the difference between knowing about God, which is a belief, and knowing God, which is a knowing, which is a conscious contact and a banishment of doubt. And it is this knowing that you are not alone, that who you are is not that which is stuck over here, but who you are is something much more divine and grand than that. And knowing that, and when you have that knowing, then you can retreat. And as you retreat and let go, you allow yourself to become that manifester. And to understand this universal force, whatever you want to call this universal force, whether it's the divine mind or universal intelligence or the organizing intelligence, but you know that it's in all things. It's not a separate God for you and a separate one for you and a separate one for you. We all know that this universal, which means one, one, this universe, this one song, is in all things and all of us. It is what allows this over here to be. And as you come to know this, you have to understand the implication of that universal intelligence. What does that mean? If it is every place, it means that there is no place that it is not. Right? Which means it does not individualize or particularize into an individual personality. It is just there in all things. If you instantly say that this God force particularizes into an individual, what you're saying is that then there's some place that it's not. If it's in this, but not here, then it's no longer universal. So it can't do that. And as you come to ask yourself this question, if I knew that I had the ability to manifest what it is that I would like to be able to manifest for myself in my life, if I knew this, which is an absolute banishment of all doubt, and I knew that I had this power, what would it be? What would you best? Would you rid yourself of an addiction? Would you manifest for yourself wealth, a healing, a divine relationship, prosperity, abundance, health, a job, a promotion, a child? Whatever it is that you would instantly think of, ask yourself, and then just set it aside, what is it within me that keeps me from doing it? You see, this is really the crux. Everything that you process or perceive to be missing from your life, that you would like to be able to manifest, has within it the same organizing divine intelligence that is in you. So when you learn to manifest, which we're going to do today, and I'll give you those principles, when you are learning to manifest, what you are really doing is aligning your intention with divine intelligence. Or another way of saying it is you are manifesting another aspect of yourself. Of yourself. That divine force that is everywhere is in all things, including that which is missing from your life. So it's really just a matter of how do I get it to show up. It's already here. We are not about the business of creation. Everything that's in the physical world is here. We're in the business of distribution and shifting around and transformation. We don't create new dust, new molecules, new atoms. They're all here. The universe is complete in the physical sense. It's just changing. It's going from one thing to the next, to the next. So that what you are about is just aligning that intention with what it is that you would like to see show up. And there are certain things that you do. And when you do them and practice them and know them, I guarantee it, money back guarantee. You buy that CD, you practice this manifesting meditation, it doesn't work, you send it back to me, I'll send you your money. Because I don't get anything for it anyway. I can't take money for it. That's one of the things I was told. So what I get from that goes to finding a cure for AIDS. And thank you. One of the things that I tell audiences is that today I have gone beyond my attachment to this physical being. I've left that behind. And my work from here on in is really solely about letting go of my ego and my self-importance. But back to this idea of what is it that we can do to get out of the tribe without letting the tribe know that we've left. The tribe has to understand that they think that you're still a member, and that's all okay. It's inside, in that inner world, that you absolutely have this knowing. One of the things, one of the principles, one of the parts of the principles that I've written about in this Manifest Your Destiny book is that you don't share what you want to manifest with anyone. The minute that your ego gets involved.
This concludes Side A. Please stop the tape and turn it over to continue the program on the other side.
think about this? Oh, this is just a lot of... And all of that kind of stuff stops the flow. It's a very private... It's like every spiritual teacher that I have been blessed to know in my life, you would never recognize. They don't look the part. They don't act the part. They don't dress the part. I had a great teacher at Wayne State University. I think the best professor that I ever had. His name, I don't know if any of you ever had him, his name was Fritz Radel. R-E-D-L. Anybody know that name? Anybody? One, two. Did you have him at the school? Yeah. He was a contemporary of Carl Jung in Austria. A great teacher. And I had him for a doctoral seminar at Wayne State. And you had to put your name in. He would teach a class, just like on Wednesday evenings. And it's like, I didn't bag groceries ever on Wednesday evenings, because I was always in Dr. Radel's class. And there would be like 2,000 people in the class. Everybody would sign. Everybody that could, get in. He would come in and give these fabulous lectures. And then he would also have this seminar for doctoral students. And you had to reach a certain level, and you had to apply, and you had to figure out how to get in. And there would only be 7 or 8 or 10 at the very most who would ever get into this. And each week we would come in and we would present different projects, and he would discuss it with us. And he wrote books like, they probably have some of his books here, Controls from Within. Brilliant man, wonderful soul. I don't know if he's still living or not. And he came into class, and he talked about, he was a very close friend of Dr. Maslow, and Maslow did the same thing. He would present to us this little scene, this little scenario. Say a self-actualizing person, a person who's living at this highest level, comes into a dinner party, and everybody at the dinner party is dressed up in formal attire. Black tie, fancy gowns. And this person shows up dressed like I am today. Pair of sneakers, pair of jeans, and a shirt. Baseball hat. What does he do? And he said, write about this for 15 minutes. And each one of us wrote for 15 minutes, trying to prove that we really had this down, He wouldn't pay attention to it. He wouldn't be bothered by it. He certainly wouldn't go home and change. He wouldn't allow this to be something that would upset him. He wouldn't draw attention. All of this kind of stuff. We would all write about how this person would act. Just he would ignore it and so on. And Fritz said, in his heavy Viennese accent, he said, none of you got it. You all missed it. He said, the answer is, he wouldn't notice. He wouldn't notice. The people that I am speaking about, and as I speak to you today about this business of that what you desire desires you, that what you want wants you, that what you feel is missing, you can attract into your life. The people who are capable of doing this, the great city teachers, the Christ consciousness livers, are those who don't notice appearances, are in a different world, and don't need to prove anything to anybody else. And they go with that inner conviction, and they know, and they're open to it. And they know that there not only are other dimensions of reality available to us, but they know how to not just peer into them and look, but how to enter them and live in those dimensions. And they are very private, and you can't find them. They're not available. They live in a sort of shadowy world without any need to prove anything. They're beyond that. And that's something that you have to adopt. Even though you don't have to do it, you don't have to go home and become a secret person and get rid of everybody in your tribe and say, all right, I've had it with all of you, You don't do that. But you take this as a very private matter between you and this divine force that is God. And in order to do it, you have to stop being what is called a cookie thief. You know what a cookie thief is? Here's a poem written by Valerie Cox. called The Cookie Thief. A woman was waiting at an airport one night with several long hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in the airport shop, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man beside her, as bold as could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. She munched cookies and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. With only one left, she wondered what he'd do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve and he's also rude. Why, he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled, and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed to the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank in her seat, then sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. If mine are here, she moaned with despair, then the others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. Now, all of us are cookie thieves in some capacities in our lives. And we have to really guard against knowing something to be what is the reality, having that as our internal world, and not being open to other possibilities. And the possibilities that I'm speaking about here involve understanding that the sacred or the divine part of you wants something very different than this ego part of you. There really are two of us in each and every one of us. One, of course, is the ego. And this ego is just an idea. You'll never find it in an autopsy. It's not anything you'll ever experience in the physical world. It's just an idea. And this idea says that who I am is special and important. And who I am is separate. Mostly who I am is separate from. And who I am is absorbed in my self-importance. And who I am is insane, because insanity is defined as believing that you're something that you're not. And this idea that we carry around of our separateness, it says over and over again that where I leave off is where you begin. And my separateness keeps me without any awareness of my connection to you or to God or to all of the rest of the environment. It's the separation that this idea has. And it is what keeps you in a state of turmoil in your life. It's not bad, it's not evil, it's not wrong. It's just the idea that somehow the tribe has taught you, and you have taken on this idea that somehow you and the rest of us and God are separate identities. And then there's another part of you. And this is the sacred part of you. And this sacred part of you, what I call the sacred self, what some call the higher self, only wants one thing. It only wants you to be at peace. It doesn't care if you're right or if you're wrong, if you're good or you're bad, if you get a lot or you get little, how much you have, who you're better than, who you defeat, how old you are, how young you are, what color you are, what sex you are. It is not interested in any of that. That's all the work of the ego. The idea of your separateness and your individualism. This part of you, this sacred higher part of you, only wants you to be at peace. I returned this year from a 2-week trip to Australia in the last 2 weeks of June with John Gray. We each did a half-day seminars together, and he talks about us men and women as being not only different from each other, but from different planets, right? Mars and Venus and so on. And he's very good. And he offers a lot of wonderful suggestions for really improving relationships. And then I talked about, my theme was, your soulmate is the person you can't stand. Now, I want to explain that. Because, you see, there's a lot of you who are not on your path. You know, they're not even on an entrance ramp to your path, right? They're not going to be on your path. They're never going to get on your path, even though you buy books and leave them around and get tapes and put them in their car and set it to the exact place that they need to hear and all of that. They just keep showing up and showing up, and you can't get rid of them. And you decide to separate from them, or you get them away from them, and you say, don't call me, and I'm going to change my phone number, and 2 months later, you're right back there with us, like in Waterworld. Remember Waterworld? When Kevin Costner becomes this, he's the guy with the gills and so on, and Dennis Hopper is this guy that, you know, and Kevin Costner just keeps showing up and bothering this guy who's trying to conquer the world or whatever he's doing in Waterworld. And he looks at Kevin Costner and he says, he said, you're like a turd that won't flush. You know, you just keep coming back. You've all had that experience, haven't you? You just go, still there. Just keeps coming back. Turns, and there it is, right? It's not real metaphysical, but it's a wonderful way of explaining it, you know. And by the way, that divine force is in those turds too. Don't think it isn't. It's in all things. So it's like there are people like this in your life, right? And these people are really like in your life, in your face. And you think that they don't belong there, that somehow you'd like to get rid of them. And the truth is that these are your soulmates. Now, people come to me and they say, I finally found my soulmate. Oh, God, this is so wonderful. We both think alike. We both act alike. We both like asparagus. We pee at the same time. He goes to say something, and before he's even got it out, I say it. I'm thinking about him, and he calls me on the telephone. We both vote for the same people. We read the same books. We read the same magazines. We like to go to the same movies. We go to bed early. We get up late. This is my soulmate. I say, you got 3 more weeks, maximum, with this thing. Max. You don't want a soulmate, you want a mirror, right? And enough of looking at what you already are already, you know? I say your soulmate is the person you can't stand. Or the person that you have difficulty in understanding. See, here's the key. My teacher said very clearly, directly to me, very clearly, Nisargadatta Maharaj, 15 years ago, very clear. Enlightenment is being immersed in and surrounded by peace in your life. Enlightened people, the people that you meet that are truly at that enlightened state, are people who are able to express peace, immersed in it, send it out, receive it back, at all moments in their life. And when someone asks, they've asked me, well, what's the difference between these highly enlightened people and the rest of us? Is it that they have unconditional love and we don't? I say, no, that's not the difference. We have unconditional love. They have unconditional love. We have that. The difference is that they don't have anything else. That's all they have. So that if you're on a cross being crucified and someone throws a spear into you, out of you comes what's inside. All I have inside is forgiveness, is love. That's all I have. If you're shot in 1948 in India, and your name is Mahatma Gandhi, you say, Krishna, love, and die. Because that's all that's inside. And that's not something that's so alien to us, to be able to be at peace in our lives. It's really all we want. It's all the sacred, the higher part of you wants for you. In A Course in Miracles, there's this wonderful affirmation. If you don't get anything else today, get this one down. All right? It says, in this moment, it says, I can choose peace instead of this. I can choose peace instead of this. What a great reminder. You're just ready to explode, and you stop yourself and say, I can choose peace instead of this. So there are essentially two paradigms that I need to talk about. I've talked about before at some of the seminars I've done here. I've written about in Your Sacred Self. But in order to be able to understand manifesting, to be able to manifest, you are really understanding this idea that the person in your life who is able to push the buttons that sends you into a frenzy, somebody else could push the same button and you react with love. But that person pushes that button and off you go. And your ego instantly enters into it and you need to make them wrong. This could be your spouse, this can be an ex-spouse, this can be a lover, this can be one of your children, this can be a mother-in-law, this can be anybody. It can even be a stranger. And they push that button and you go into a frenzy. What is happening in this moment is that this is a divine master who has showed up in your life that you should be kneeling down and paying homage to and saying, thank you, God, for sending this divine teacher into my life. I know your ego is really having a tough time with that. But what is happening in this moment is, here is someone who is teaching you in this moment that you have not mastered yourself yet. That's what they teach you in this moment. And that is your soulmate. That is the person that you need to be able to send love from a peaceful inner expression that says, I could choose peace instead of this. And when you are in a relationship with that person, and they push the button, and you are able to be at peace, truly at peace, not acting. Now these great spiritual teachers come disguised as manipulative, cunning SOBs very often. And there's only a few of them in the whole planet. But they move around a lot. Right? And they got a lot of disguises. But until and the test for you to be able to do this is very, very simple. It's a very simple test. Something you can work on when you leave here today. You can work on it the minute that you walk out of here with that one that won't flush. Who keeps coming back. When you have the choice to be right or to be kind, you pick kind. You pick kind. The higher part of you says, be at peace. When you're at peace, you react with kindness. The ego says, be right. It's much more important to be right. Why do you think I subtitled this book, Making the Decision to Be Free? You are only free when you lose your self-absorption, your sense of separation from those that send you into those frenzies, and your sense of separation from God. Because God is that divine organizing intelligence that is in all things, including this person who is pushing these buttons and keeps showing up. And they come disguised. Very often, when you're a scurvy elephant yourself, you get them back. It's sort of like there's a karmic debt here. I don't know. I'm not quite sure I understand it. But in this karmic payback system, that I've read about, if you're a scurvy elephant yourself, you get back 2 or 3. Well, I got 8, so I must have been really... And I have one that is really the queen. Her name is Serena. And Serena is 11 years old. And she is my divine master. I pay homage to her every day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Serena. Thank you for showing up in my life. I follow her around with a pad. I say, come on, say something stupid. Come on, I need material. I said, get out of here. Will you get out of here? The only thing that I made a mistake with Serena, the only mistake I've ever made is when we named her, Serena is not appropriate for her. And she's great. I mean, she's like the real test, the great love of my life. But boy, oh boy. I mean, she said, you know, there's a rumor that you actually wrote a book about how to raise kids. Is there any truth to that? I want to expose that right away, you know. That's how she talks. It's like, you know, with the leg going up and down and the eyes roll back and the head. I said, you know, you could come to my seminar. I'm giving a seminar right down there. I said, people actually pay to hear me speak. I said, would you like to come? She said, why? Like, get a life, you know. And she's giving me advice almost every day on how to be a better parent, what I should be doing, what I'm doing wrong, if I only did it this way. That, I'm telling you right now, if you would just listen to me, I really know about this. Okay, I'm 11 years old. I know what I'm talking about. She talks really fast like this and goes on and on. Now just listen. Just try this. If you just tried this, if you just did it this way. And finally, she's giving me a hard time about something I'm telling her that she has to do, or her mother's telling her. And I said to her finally one day in exasperation, I said, Serena, I said, I want you to stop blaming me for the kind of father that I am, and I want you to start taking responsibility for it yourself. And she looked at me. This is a truth, exactly. She looked at me and she put her leg out like into her posture, you know. She said, you want to run that one by me one more time? I said, you have got to stop blaming me for the... She said, did you just tell me that I should be responsible for the kind of father you are? I said, exactly. That's what I'm saying. She said, I don't get it. I said, well, before you came here, you were in what we call nowhere. Nowhere. You were in the spirit world, in God's loving grasp. And you came here and you had lessons you had to learn. We all have these great lessons and we all have a heroic mission and there's no mistakes in the whole universe. God doesn't make any mistake. And you had these lessons to learn. And God asked you, what is it? What are these lessons that you have to learn? And you told God exactly what it is that you had to learn. And God said, well, if you want to learn those lessons, then this is the father you need. And you picked me. You said, all right, I'll take him. And you picked Mom. And you chose us to be the people who will help you to learn the lessons that you have to learn in this lifetime. She said, I don't remember any of this. All right? No. I said, your memory is not a good indication of whether what I'm saying is true. All right? You don't remember sleeping in a crib, but you were in a crib for a long time. You don't remember what you dreamt about. You don't remember what you had for breakfast last Thursday. Your memory will deceive you all the time. It is not your memory that you ought to be referring to here. Trust me, I know what I'm speaking about. You chose me and picked me to be in your life, and I'm just doing what I know how to do. So she said, you're then telling me that before I got here, I picked you to be my father. I said, exactly. She said, I must have been in a hurry. I said, when you're making important decisions like this, don't rush through. One of the things I've been telling you all your life. Slow down. Take your time. Don't put... She's great. I'm telling you, she is great. But the greatest scurvy elephant story I ever had from my kids, all of whom teach these great lessons, is my wife went away last October to work on her book about a spiritual approach to childbirth and infancy care, which she's working on completing now. And she has this whole idea that there's too much fear in the process of bringing children into the world, and women are sort of, the tribal consciousness is one in which this is something that you should be afraid of, rather than that you are participating in this miracle, and that you ought to see it that way and program yourself that way and change around your biography. You'll change around your biology, and you'll change around how this experience affects you, and it's very divine and spiritual. She's writing about that, and she's ultimately qualified to do so, having had 7 children. So she went away in October. Now, usually when I go away to write, I always tell her, like, I hear voices, you know, and I said, my voice tells me I got to go away and write. And I go away to the west side of the state, and I live in Florida on the East Coast, and I go over to Marco Island, and I write for 5 days, and I come home on the weekends, you know, like a good father and husband. She rented a house on Maui. for the month of October. And she went away to write, and I stayed home, and I didn't have any speaking engagements, and I didn't do any write or anything like that. I just decided I'll be Mr. Mom. I'll be Dad and Mom for the whole month. And I had no idea of how many appointments these kids have. I couldn't believe that, you know. It's like, and now when I tell them that I didn't have anybody to drive me anywhere, they just say, yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, will you, Dad? You know, about how tough it was when you were a kid and all of that. And they have lessons, and they have 4 different schools that they go to, and they have to be picked up at different times, and they have a piano, and they got singing, and they got this and tennis and horseback ride, whatever. I don't know. There's 1,000 different things that they got to do and where they've got to be, and they got to go shopping, and they got to buy, you know, all kinds of feminine things and so on. I mean, it's just I got to go take them for all of this stuff, and so I hired 3 more people to help me out while I was there. Not that I needed them, you understand. I mean, I could handle it, but. So I had taken I usually get up around 4 a.m. and run for a couple of hours every day. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm in this program called The Zone, Enter the Zone, and I've been doing that and endorse it and feel very wonderful about it and balancing your intake and exercise and all of that. I've been running for over 20 years now, every day. I mean, every day. And, so I get up early and I run, and I usually do 10 or 12 miles. And then I come in and I take one of my daughters to school, and I come back, and I was making breakfast for them. My wife makes waffles for them in the morning. So I decided to help out with the waffles, only she uses this machine and all that. I just use a toaster. It's a whole lot easier. They're frozen, you stick them in there, they don't know the difference, is it? And it's not easy, because some like them darker, you know, and some like them lighter, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And I'm having breakfast, making breakfast, and they're behind me at the table behind me, the 4 of them. Summer, Serena, Sands, and Sage, who all go to this elementary school. And I've got one in pre-K, and another one in 8th grade, and one in 3rd grade, and one in 5th grade, and 2 in college, and 1 in graduate school, and 1 out, all right? So, I'm making breakfast and having a good time, and I feel great. I've run, and I feel terrific, and I've balanced all my protein and carbohydrates, and I'm feeling terrific. And all of a sudden, I hear Summer, my 13-year-old, say to Serena, who's sitting behind her, she said, if you didn't have any feet, would you wear shoes? And Serena looked at her like, you know, that, what? What kind of a question is that? Of course not. She said, if I didn't have any feet, would I wear shoes? Of course not. How could I wear shoes? And Summer looked at her and said, well, then, why are you wearing that bra? She said, whew. Oh, I love that story. I wrote that down. I had never heard anything like that. All of these people who show up in your life, who know how to send you into these frenzies, remember, you have a choice. Now, forget about your children. I mean, these are people that are not going to leave. These are people who are going to continue to show up, and you have a choice. And the choice always is to be right or to be kind. Just start practicing being kind. Just start it. Start it as a program. Just as you're about to react, just as you're about... You see how free you would be. I always tell audiences, imagine you were so free that you didn't have to think about yourself for a whole day. Imagine what that day would be like. How free you would be. If anything that anybody said, and this I must say, there's a lot of these areas that I work on. Everything I write about comes from my own life experience. I go where I'm sent. I teach what I'm told to teach. I go within and listen to that voice, and I let it come out. And I must say that the thing that I think I have gotten the best at is this business of being in a place where I can be kind rather than right most of the time in my life. And when my wife and I made that commitment to each other, that we were going to work at being kind rather than right on the daily little things that you find as irritants in most relationships, if you can just get that out of it, you transform the relationship. And it doesn't take 2 people to do it. Forget that. The minute that you tell yourself that if I do it but they don't, then it's your ego again saying this doesn't work. How people treat you is their karma. How you react is yours. And so you make that choice. And if that choice to be kind is continually, remove yourself from that relationship. Kindly, with love. But you can literally almost always transform it. Love is the glue that holds virtue. Paradigm. The paradigm of getting out of the tribal consciousness which says being right is more important than being kind. The second and probably toughest one is this business that I talked about earlier of being willing to be God. Most of us are not willing to be God. And this is a tough one for all of us. And we have to learn this. Probably it's the greatest lesson that we have to learn as we incarnate into our human awareness. This somehow figuring out that who I am is sacred and divine. You see, I think essentially what operates in our universe and what the tribe has taught us is that there are two theories of nature. And one of these theories will allow us to become a manifester and attract to us what it is that we would like to have. And the other prohibits it because it interferes with the flow of the universal force. The first theory of nature says that the universe is a monarchy. And as a monarchy, there is a king. And the king is in charge. And this king, we can call by many names. Call it God. And so God becomes something that is separate from us. We are the subjects of this king, that is the monarch. And because the king is separate from us and better than us, this divine right of kings, remember? Our country was founded on abolishing that kind of a notion. Well, this idea somehow says, this theory of nature, this first theory of nature that I'm presenting here, as the universe as a monarchy, says that who you are is inferior to this God, this monarch. And not only are you inferior to it, but you are, at your core, untrustworthy. Because you are conceived in sin. There's something basically at your core wrong with you. And this theory also says that because you cannot be trusted, you have to rely upon this thing outside of you that you are separate from in order to sustain yourself. Where it came from is very bizarre. It has nothing to do with the spiritual literature, what we are taught by the great spiritual teachers. If you read the New Testament, there's nothing about that in there. But that's sort of what has happened because egos have come along and said, being separate is more important for us to be able to control you, if you are thought of as being inferior. Now, the problem with this first theory of nature, ladies and gentlemen, the problem with it is that if you subscribe to it, you will always be lost. And most tribes subscribe to it. God is seen as a male, generally a white male, generally a white dead male in heaven. That's how we see it. That's what this theory says. And you will be lost because it says essentially at your core you are not trustworthy because you are separate from that which is divine. And if you are not trustworthy and you just determine that you're not trustworthy, you can't even trust in your untrustworthiness. Because it's coming from act upon, when you basically get down to where is this coming from, it is coming from an untrustworthy source. So you can never ever actualize yourself. And you can never ever be divine, nor can you ever become a manifester or do, as Jesus said, all that I have done and even greater things. You can't do that if you subscribe to this theory of God as the boss. And the only one who really knows is the boss's son. And the boss's son is different from you. You are not the boss's son. All right? That's one. Second theory of nature says that God is not a dead white male in heaven, but that God is a universal intelligence that flows through all things, and at its core it is love, and it does not judge, and it is everywhere, and it is available, and it is inexhaustible, and it does not born, and it does not die. It is eternal. When Lao Tzu, the great author of the Tao, when Jesus, when Buddha, when Zoroaster, when all of the great spiritual teachers, Muhammad, all came down the road and were asked the same question. The question was, what is real, Master? What is real? They all responded with the same answer. That is real, which never changes. Which never changes. So what you're looking for is the part of you that is eternal, that never changes. When I finished writing Manifest Your Destiny and these 9 spiritual principles, and I must say, it was very much like being back at Pershing High School. I sat down with my connection to God and my feeling of what I wanted to write about, the tape that Guruji had sent me, having done this manifesting for several months now, and knowing that I wanted to write these principles and to keep them clean and clear and concise with no extras in it at all, tight as could possibly be, and I didn't know how many there were or which one would follow which. And as I meditated and allowed it to flow and allowed it to flow and just surrendered, it all became very clear. It seems to me that there are really 4 pathways to mastery of anything in our life. The lowest, or the first pathway, is called the pathway of discipline. If you want to go out and learn to hit a tennis ball, you just go out and you hit it, 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 and you just practice, practice, practice. If you want to learn how to hit a golf ball, if you want to learn how to dance the Macarena, whatever it is that you want to learn to do, you go out there and you have discipline, all right? Then the second pathway is called the pathway of wisdom. And this is where you now begin to apply the intellect to the discipline, which is what we do in school. We stop. It's only the second pathway, but we think that we're educated when we have the discipline and we have the wisdom that goes with it. Now you learn how to put topspin, now you learn how to slices, now you learn how to hit an overhead, how to hit a lob, how to hit a drop shot, how to plan your strategy, how to get your opponent out of position, how to do all of the things that it takes to win at tennis or at golf or at dancing or at playing the piano or whatever it is that you're learning to do, including spiritual awareness. That's the second path. But there are a couple of other pathways as well, and I'll share with you what they are as this afternoon unfolds. But this idea of thinking that just because I have discipline and wisdom that I now have mastery is absurd, and it's where schools almost always stop. Because you've got to go way beyond just applying your intellect and applying your discipline. You have to move into another dimension, if you will, and understand what is called the third and fourth pathways to mastery, which I'll talk about very, very shortly. So when I sat down and did this, I had the discipline and I had the wisdom, but I didn't have what else it took until I was able to meditate and go within and discover it. And the way that I want to present this business of being willing to be God is, as I've often said, I think of God as like the ocean. And I think of myself as like a glass. And I take this glass and I dip it into the ocean. And when I dip the glass into the ocean, I ask myself, what do I have here? And what I have, of course, is a glass of God. And it's not as big, and it's not as strong, and it's not as omnipotent and not as omniscient, perhaps, but it is still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, you are what God is doing. We have to know this. And if you take a drop of water out of the ocean and you put it over here, and you say, okay, this is a piece of God, but it is separate from this ocean, what can it do? It just disappears, doesn't it? It just dissipates. It has no strength. It cannot accomplish anything that it can't sustain life, this little drop of water. In order for it to sustain life, it has to be connected to, not separate from, its source, doesn't it? And so the same is true of us. As long as we are in ego minds which convince us that we are separate from this, that first theory of nature that I've just described, as long as we see ourselves over here, and we do, because the tribe has taught us this, because thinking of yourself as God is perhaps the greatest criticism we can give to you. When in fact, if you don't understand that you are divine, and that you are connected to, you are a piece of God, you are what God is doing. And that's the teaching that most of us have failed to grasp or failed to understand. When I finished writing, I did these principles, one right after the other, and it took me about, I'd say 2 months or so, January and February, going home on the weekends and so on. But it was like, and I would just write, and it was this powerful force, this energy, this being in awe, just being in awe of what was coming through me, that I could actually write the principles for manifesting. And I was like, ooh, who am I to be writing that kind of thing? And then stopping that and saying, just let it come. Just let it come. It's working. It's working in your life, and you are going where you're sent. And you have this teacher that sent you this tape and wrote to you and encouraged you to do this. This is all being done for a purpose. And get your ego out of it. Get your ego out of it, which is what I did all morning this morning in my meditation. I asked the question, how may I serve? How may I serve these people? And I let go of my exhaustion and all of that stuff. I remember reading Siddhartha and going through the process he was going through of his awakening when he discovered suffering. This was the story of Buddha as a young man, and he had been fasting, and he had been fasting for something like 50 days. And his friend Govinda finally said to him one day, he said, Siddhartha, he said, what good is fasting? And Siddhartha replied with one of the great responses in all of literature, I can laugh at hunger. He was making a distinction between that which was hungry and that which was laughing at it.
This concludes side
Of the room, this side of the stage, is my right-hand side, that which is the material world. And this side over here is that which is able to notice it, which is observing it. You can do the same with fatigue. I can laugh at fatigue, because I am not that which is tired. I am not that which is hungry. As this woman said to my teacher, Nisargadatta, when she had cancer, I suffer so. He said, you do not suffer. He said, only the person you imagine yourself to be is suffering. And so you come to an awareness that this world over here, when I was this little boy, 3 or 4 years old, and I was living out in Mount Clemens at 231 Town Hall Road with this lady, Mrs. Scarf. And my brother Dave was with me. We had a pathway that would lead up to the house. And on the left, along the fence, there was these lilies of the valley. And I cannot smell a lily of the valley today without going back to that experience. It was beautiful. I even bought my wife a big bottle of lilies of the valley perfume. I think it was at Kmart or something. And she said, what is this cheap stuff you're giving me? I said, it just reminds me of that moment, of those times. But on the right-hand side, we would plant tomatoes in the springtime. And I can remember, this was like yesterday. She would take this big silver-colored sprinkling can with the holes in the top and the spout, and a digger, and a whole bag of tomato seeds. And she would dig holes, and then put the seeds in there, and then cover it up, and I would pour the water on, this little boy. And I said to her, where do the tomatoes come from? She'd say, they're in the seeds. I said, there's tomatoes in those seeds? She said, not exactly. I said, well, where are the tomatoes? Where do they come from? She said, God will bring them. Well, when you're a scurvy elephant, that's not enough. And I can remember this taking a handful of those little tomato seeds and putting them in my back jeans pocket and going out behind this chicken coop that we had there when I was all alone. And there was a little paring knife on that little table. And I took those seeds and I started opening those seeds, just cutting them open. And inside of those seeds was this dust, just this brown dust. And there was nothing that looked like or resembled a tomato in there. And I thought, where do the tomatoes come from? There's not anything resembling a tomato in there. All there is a potentiality for tomato, a future pull. And now I have learned, since having written about and studied quantum mechanics, that if you were to take that tomato seed dust and you were to put it under a microscope and examine it, you would see little particles and spaces. And if you took those spaces out and took the particles left and put those under a microscope of even stronger magnification and studied them, you would discover that there were more spaces and more tinier particles. And if you just kept doing that ad infinitum until you got to the very last and the tiniest particle, past molecules, past atoms, past electrons, croutons, whatever else they have in there, protons, all of the stuff that's in there that you memorized, past subatomic particles, smaller yet quarks, and looked at the tiniest ones and put them in particle accelerators and slammed them together and took those particles and put those under an atomic microscope and just kept doing it. Eventually, what you discover is there is nothing there. There is no thing in that tomato potentiality. It's just an energy. And that is what is the cause of everything over here in the physical domain. That energy. And all of us, because of our tribal consciousness, have made a decision that we don't know how to get into this world over here. We forfeited our ability to be in this world, which is the world of co-creation, which is the world of manifestation, which is the world in which from here we no longer are at our physicalness. We're at something much grander than that. And when I finished this manuscript, and I was in this incredible state of awe and bliss at having been able to just sit down at a typewriter and allow it to come through me with very few quotations and no case studies and none of the things that we call filler in the publishing world, where you make the book a little thicker by adding stories and so on. This is just like straight, this is what manifesting is about. I challenge myself to write it. Here's principle 1, here's principle 2, up through principle 9. And I sent the manuscript in, and my publishers were very content and happy and excited, and they showed me a design, and the book is going to be coming out, and they're very happy and so on. But they said, you don't have a display quote. A display quote is a quotation that you put at the beginning of the book that sort of summarizes what the book is about. You'll see it when you believe it. I had that quotation from John Quincy Adams about his body, and I am not my body. John Quincy Adams as well, but the house in which he lives is becoming dilapidated. But John Quincy Adams himself as well, thank you. And then he died. And as I looked at the display quotes in my own books, in Real Magic, it was a poem from Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The poem said, what if you slept, and what if in your sleep you dreamed? And what if in your dream you went to heaven, and there picked a strange and wonderful flower? And what if, when you awoke, you held that flower in your hand? Ah, what then? And Larry, my editor up in New York, said, Larry Ashmead said, you don't have a display quote. And I was downstairs. We had finished the writing, and I'd taken my family over to this hotel on Maui. We have a place that we live on the west part of Maui, but we took them over to Wailea. It's called the Grand Wailea. It's a real fancy, schmancy place. And I thought, well, instead of sending them all to college, we'll spend 2 nights in this hotel. Which is pretty much the way it was. And I had been up there the night before, and I'd been reading through, in every book in Maui, they have a lot of Oriental people coming in, so they have the teachings of Buddha, and then they also have the New Testament, placed by the Gideons. And I was reading the teachings of Buddha, and then in there's this wonderful quote, and I went back up to the room, and I wrote it down. It says, "The only effort of any intelligent person in this world should be the first and the foremost thing, how to know something which cannot be destroyed by death." How to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. And then I picked up the New Testament, and I always like to read John. For some reason, St. John was a scurvy elephant himself, I think. And he had two quotes in there. Well, one of them says, "Is it not written in your law that I have said that you are gods? Is it not written in your laws that I have said you are gods?" And later on in John, he says, "And on that day you will know that I am in you, and I am in the Father, and you are in me." And those were the quotes that I placed at the front of the book, those two quotes. Because Jesus was not referring to his spleen and his beard and his sandals and his arms and his legs. He was referring to that which is in you and in the Father and in me. And how we misinterpreted, how we've taken this idea somehow and adopted this first theory of nature, which says that no, I am separate and inferior from that, and bought into that whole ego-driven thing that has caused so much division and so much sorrow and pain and suffering in our world, because we don't know. When St. Paul was in prison, chained to a Roman soldier after the crucifixion, writing to the Philippians, these people, to tell them about the ways of Christ, his words in Philippians 2, verses 5 and 6 were this: "Have in you," he said, "the same mind as Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God." To be equal with God. The two paradigms to transcend, to reach the stage of becoming a manifester, include taming the ego. Rabindranath Tagore, a great Indian poet, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1927 with a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali, has this conversation with God. And he says, "I went out alone on my way to my tryst, but who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame. But I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company." This person who adds his loud voice to every word you utter, this person who makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger, will never allow you to be at peace, because you can give it the greatest booze it's ever had, and the greatest sex it's ever had, and the greatest drugs it's ever had, and the most beautiful car it could ever possess, and the most beautiful women or the most beautiful and gorgeous men, and the nicest home, and the nicest clothes, and trips to Saks, and everything that you could ever want for yourself. You give it that, and the next morning, after it's all worn off and you wake up, it will demand a whole new list. It is always, always asking for more. It lives on the premise that more is better. And it's why I call it a counterfeit freedom, because you never get enough. But when you know how to choose peace, when you are at peace in your life, this thing that keeps saying, yes, but I am so important. And virtually every addiction that you have, and I'll talk about this whole idea of virtually all of the things that our ego keeps us stuck in, keep us from being able to have that knowing, that divine knowing that says, I can indeed do all that any great spiritual master has done, and even greater things. But I have to not be needing to be right. I have to transcend that need of the ego, that self-importance, belief that I am separate from and understand that I am connected to. I am a piece of God. I am what God is doing. And I no longer have to be right. And you get to be free. The third pathway to mastery, after discipline, and after wisdom, and after school, when school is out, because that's where school stops, is the pathway of unconditional love. You now fall in love with what you do. You fall in love with it. It becomes you, you become it. When you are inspired in your life, when you're inspired, when everything is working, when you're writing, or when you're cooking, or when you're making love, or when you're creating music, or when you're in your dream state, or whatever, and you're just like, you don't think about your body, you don't think about any aches and pains that it might have, you don't think about how old you are, you don't think about your finances and what the difficulties are. All of that is transcended. You are in the zone. You are in a zone where everything just seems to flow, and there's an overriding spiritual objective to all that you are doing. And you have this, you have discipline, and you have wisdom, but you also are at peace. You are love. You are in harmony. You are congruent. There is no distinction between what you think and what you feel and how you behave. It is all one. It's the stage of unconditional love. And when you get to this place in your life, in anything that you are doing, you're way past just discipline and mastery and wisdom. And I want to tell you a story that has touched at my heart so deeply, a story of unconditional love that transcends anything I've ever known before in my life. A story that has moved me into a space of unconditional love that I didn't know existed within me. Last Christmas morning, 1995, I picked up the newspaper. The newspaper had a story. The story headlined, "Woman spends her 26th Christmas in a coma." I read the story. My daughter Tracy was down visiting us in Florida from Minneapolis, and my wife was there. The other children were off playing. And I said, "Tracy," and I said, "Marcy, come in here. I want to read this story to you. It's Christmas morning. It seems so appropriate." And the story told of a girl who was 16 years old on the 3rd of January, 1970, 26 years ago, who was a diabetic, but it was controlled, and she was taking an oral form of insulin called diabetes. But as an adolescent, it wasn't reaching her bloodstream, and they didn't know that at the time. And she awoke around 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was in tremor, and she was in shock, and she was shaking, and her legs were twitching. And her mother and her father, her mother's name was Kay, and her father was Joe, and her younger sister was Colleen, who was 14 at the time. They drove off to the hospital very quickly. And they were in the hospital, and it was apparent that Eduardo was slipping away. And the day before, she had been a normal 16-year-old child. Everything was, she had been accepted to the University of Notre Dame as the first female in the female class to be admitted into Notre Dame. And she was a happy-go-lucky young girl. And she started slipping away, and she looked up at her mother, and her mother was there with her. Her mother's name is Kay. And her mother was holding her hand, and Eduardo looked up at her and said, "Mommy," and she had never called her Mommy before. She had called her mother. She said, "Mommy," she said, "you won't leave me, will you?" And Kay said, "I will not leave you. I promise. And a promise is a promise. I will be there for you." And then she slipped into this coma, and her eyes rolled back in her head. And she was in a stage 1 coma for several months. They had to tape her eyes shut at night. She was in such a deep coma. She was just catatonic, just rigid. And 26 years later, 1995 then, now 1996, was still in the coma. And they made a decision, Kay and Pauline and Joe, that they would not put her into a home because they had promised her that they would never leave her. Now, they would have had all of their bills paid for had they been she'd been put into a home, but they made the decision as a family that they would bring her home. This was 4 months later because they could no longer afford the care in the hospital, and their hospitalization and insurance had run out. She was a mathematics teacher, and he was a coach at a Catholic high school in southern Florida. And I read the story, and the story also said that she has to be fed every 2 hours. That's 12 times a day. She has brain activity. And that over the past 25 years or 26 years, she had gone from being in this catatonic state to now being able to blink her eyes, and now being able to recognize, and to turn her head once in a while, and to try to speak now and then, to even cry. And she was now in what they call a stage 9 coma, which was a stage that is sort of like when you're coming out of ether in surgery. You have an awareness of what is going, but you can't break through the curtain kind of thing, which is called the stage 9 of a coma. And the next stage, of course, is coming out of it. And I read this story, and the story, it's like you have to try to imagine, ladies and gentlemen, since 1970, 27 years now, never sleeping in a bed, but sleeping in a chair next to your daughter for 27 years, and getting up every 2 hours to feed this child, and every 4 hours to take her blood and give her insulin based upon what the reading was, and to train yourself to do that. 6 years after this happened, the father, who was overcome with the debt that they were encountering, they were now over $300,000 in debt that they had borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed from shaky characters, and gotten credit cards and more credit cards, and one in K. O'Bear, one in Catherine O'Bear, one in K. Catherine O'Bear, 32 different credit cards operating just to keep her daughter alive. She said she would do anything rather than allow her to die or allow her to not keep the promise that she had made. Never going to a movie in 27 years, never going for a walk in 27 years, never going outside of the home for anything other than medicine and being gone for no more than an hour, never sleeping for more than 45 minutes. Every day for 27 years, and still going. And in those 27 years, the daughter had never had a bed sore because she had been turned every hour by her mother, and her hair braided, and her legs shaved, and kept in this immaculate condition. All through it, never complaining, never finding fault. One of the most positive, upbeat stories of unconditional love that I've ever experienced. And I was so touched by it, it was Christmas morning, that I took out a book that I wrote called Real Magic, and I signed it, and I wrote in there, "You are my hero." And I sent her a check for $1,000, and I thought I had really sort of done a nice Christmas thing. And then like we all do, I forgot. I let go. And I went away. She lives about 40 miles south of where I live. And I went away in January and February to write this book that I've been talking to you about. And one day while I was writing, about 3 weeks in, I turned on the TV for the first time. And on the show there was a show called Inside Edition that came on in the evening after the news with Deborah Norville, whom I and respected always. And she said, on the show today will be a woman whose daughter's been in a coma for 26 years. And they opened up the story with Kay reading to Eduarda from Real Magic in the opening line, which says, "This is a book about miracles." And there she was reading to her daughter from this book I had sent. And I had one of those sort of synchronistic moments, you know. And I said to myself, when I get home, I'm going to look that woman up. I don't remember her name or even where she lived, but I'm going to see if I can find her, and perhaps I can do more. And I came back in February, and there was a big stack of mail, and the top letter on there was a letter from Kay thanking me for the book and the check and inviting me to come down. Well, I called her, and talked to her, and the next day my wife Marceline and I went down to see her. Now, a few years ago, Marcy and I went to Assisi in Italy with 3 of our daughters. It was a pilgrimage sort of for us in our marriage. It was I had always had a great fondness for St. Francis, the first person to experience the stigmata, the wounds of Christ. A man who just months after his death was made a saint by the Catholic Church, and that generally takes centuries to accomplish. A person who had these great healing capacities of animals and life, and always would heal others, but never himself, because he wanted them always to know it was God who was doing the healing. And I had read his biography called God's Fool, and it had always touched me very deeply, talking about leaving the tribe, tossing off all of your clothes and going down into the piazza. My favorite movie ever is Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, the Franco Zeffirelli version, which you can rent at Blockbuster. The Franco Zeffirelli version of St. Francis. What a powerful movie made back in the 70s. Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. And so we went to St. Francis's Ponciuncula, the chapel where he had done all of his healing, and where he had died in the 13th century. And when we walked into that little place where more prayer has probably been said in that room than any room on the planet, my wife and I looked at each other and we both broke into tears. The energy of love was so strong. The prayer that had been said there. There were people from China, from Africa, from Indonesia. There were large groups in the large chapel around this small chapel, all waiting to get in. And we went in and meditated together for 20 minutes. And it was life-enhancing and nurturing, soul-nurturing and changing. And when we walked down to Kay's home and walked into Eduardo's room, we had the exact same experience. Because when I researched Eduardo's life, it turns out that she was like a little saint herself. She gave away all of her money that she ever got to everybody else that didn't have any money as a little girl. She took blankets down to the people who lived on the streets without even telling anyone else because she couldn't tolerate them being cold. She didn't know how to judge anyone ever, never found fault with anyone. She had a horse. She was given a horse by her father, and she couldn't ride it. She could only feed it and touch it and wash it and care for it. But she just felt it was a burden to be on it. It just was her way. She didn't condemn anybody who decided to, but for her, it had to be, I am with you, not on top of you and dominating you. This was the kind of person she was, and she carried books about the saints with her wherever she went and studied them and asked her mother always questions about the saints. And then she went into this coma. And I went out to Los Angeles shortly after that, after going down there and visiting her. And I was doing this show called Politically Incorrect. And I wasn't quite sure why I had done it. The show I had been on with some pretty bizarre characters, but then I got this letter after the show was over, and it says, I saw you on Politically Incorrect the other night. I found myself being angry with all the people who were taking humorous potshots at you and your books. Then I watched you, your graciousness in the face of their egos, and I let go of my anger. Thanks for teaching me how to do that. And I knew why I had been on the show with some people who were stoned and acting pretty bizarre and making salacious remarks about what I had done and so on. And I felt so at peace. And I had been at Eduardo's the day before. And then I got a call from my wife saying, call Kay. And I called Kay, and Kay said, could you come home tonight on the red eye and be here tomorrow morning? Oprah Winfrey's taping a show on people in coma, and we would love you to be on the show. So I flew home that night, and I came to her. I got off the airplane, and I went right over to their home down in Miami, and we taped the show. And the show aired, and the story was the show revolved around this policeman who had been in a coma for 9 years in Tennessee and had a bullet in his head and suddenly just started talking after 9 years. And it was this miracle. He just woke up one day and started talking. And they had his brother and the relatives were on the show, and all of the people who had been in comas who had come out were talking about what a hardship it was and what a struggle it was and how hard it was for them after, because the person wasn't the same and all of this. And then Kay came on the show. And Oprah said, why do you do this? And she said, because God asked me to do it. And God never asks you to do anything you can't do. And she said, don't you feel it's a burden? She said, I am honored to serve my daughter in this way. I am honored to serve. And as she talked in this positive, upbeat way, she said, no one knows why. But then she told me the story after we got back from the show. And she said in 1991, she got up at 4 a.m. to give a 4 a.m. feeding, and there was a bright light in the bedroom. And she was afraid that someone had come to hurt Eduardo because other people had shot bullets into their home and had sent poison medicine saying, we're going to put her out of her misery. She's a vegetable, you should let her go. And Kay said, I've never seen a vegetable smile. And to let her go means to starve her to death. You expect me to stand there and watch my daughter starve to death for 3 weeks without feeding her? I wouldn't know how to do that. And her husband had died 6 years later, and Colleen, her younger sister, couldn't take it either. Became a crack cocaine addict. Ended up in prison. Kay raised a grandson, and every 2 hours she was there for her daughter, turning her, feeding her, for a quarter of a century. And when I asked her what she would like if she had enough money, she said, I would just like to have enough money that one day, each week, I could sleep through and hire a nurse to take care of Eduardo during the night. That's the only thing I would like. That to her would be as rich as you can be. When you get into your bed tonight and take for granted you're sleeping through, think about Kay. And after I had become involved in this story, and my wife had become involved in the story and the things that had happened, on Easter Sunday we went down and we were singing to her. And I said to my daughter, Sky sang to her, I Will Always Love You, the Whitney Houston song. And I said to Sky afterwards, I said, honey, come on, we have to go. It's Easter. Grandma's coming over and we have to get home. A tear came to Eduardo's eye as I said the children had to leave. And they had been sitting up on the bed with her, holding her hand. And this morning in 1991, Kay told me that day, on Easter Sunday, that she had walked into the room and there was this figure. And the figure was the Blessed Mother, whom she described in greater detail than I'm giving now. And she asked her, after her initial fear, this vision that she saw, why is my daughter in a coma? And she said, your daughter is a victim soul. You'll have to find out what that means. And she called all around to the different churches. And finally she went to this cardinal called, whom she had known because she's a very strong Irish Catholic woman. And the cardinal said, where did you hear that term? And she said, well, I would rather not tell you, because she was always afraid that people would think she was crazy talking about ghosts visiting her in her home. And he said, well, that's a term that goes back to antiquity. It refers to people who take on suffering in order to teach compassion. And they choose it themselves, very much like Gandhi did when he would fast as people were rioting in the streets and refused to eat. He said, your daughter has done this. And when there's enough compassion and when her mission is completed, she will no longer be in her coma. And the miracles that have taken it, she told me about people who had brain tumors who had come, and Eduardo's hand had been placed on her for the night and went to have their surgery, and no trace of the tumors. That there's something divine and magnificent that has just touched me in such an incredible way. And I was meditating one day. My wife and I had been down there. We were taking food down to her. We were helping out financially. And this debt was just choking at her. And I thought, I'd really like to get her out of debt. Maybe that's the compassion that needs to be taught. And then I thought, what can I do? And I called Kay. I said, how would you like it if I wrote your story? And I told your story all across America as an example of unconditional love that is so powerful that it could really perhaps fulfill Eduardo's mission of teaching compassion. She said, I'll have to ask the Blessed Mother. And she has these conversations with the Blessed Mother. And she had been told that as long as she kept her faith, that the right person or people would show up in her life, and that all that she worried about would somehow disappear. And you don't know over the years how she has survived, with celebrity auctions and cookbooks and borrowing from very shady characters, all in the name of just keeping her daughter alive. And the debts just kept going. So I said, I'm going to do it. And the Blessed Mother said, he's the one. He will do it with dignity. And I went away on April the 1st. I had 9 free days this spring. I went away on April the 1st, and I came back on April the 9th. And I wrote her story. And it's now out, and it's called A Promise is a Promise. The almost unbelievable story of a mother's unconditional love and what it can teach us. And I asked my wife, Marceline, to write 1 chapter telling a mother's love story and how she understood what a mother would do. And I decided that there would be nothing coming to me from this. No profits, no royalties. All of it would go to the Eduardo Obera Fund. And we'll put this book on the bestseller. And we'll get 1 million of them out there, and you'll make a couple of $1 million. The people who have interviewed me have said that it has transformed and touched their lives. People tell me it's the most inspirational thing they've ever heard or read. If you'd like to do your Christmas shopping and know that it's going to a wonderful cause and be inspired, pick up a copy or two of A Promise is a Promise. And what it has done for me, it has allowed me to get what's in it for Wayne Dyer out. And that's the greatest gift that I could ever be given, is to do something and take the talents and the skills that have been given to me and to put them to use for a cause like this. It's astounding and astonishing. Anyone you know who's experienced unconditional love towards you would value this. The 3 stages that I have presented for mastery up till now are the stage of discipline, or the practice of discipline, the practice of wisdom, applying the intellect to what it is that you are doing with your body, and then finally, the 3rd one is this practice of unconditional love, of which Kay Obera is a living model for us, as was St. Francis, as are so many people who have been in your life, particularly mothers, love themselves and ask nothing in return, which is what love is. And at the back of that book, A Promise is a Promise, is Kay's address. She would love to hear from you. She would love you to include her and Eduardo in her prayers. If you'd like to send her a donation of some kind, that would be most graciously accepted, even if it's $1. And she, thus far, although it's getting a pretty big job, has been able to respond to everybody who has written to her. She's a dynamo of a lady, I'm telling you. And the 4th stage, or the 4th pathway, if you will, to mastery is what is called surrender. And in learning to surrender in what you are attempting to master, what you are doing is you are surrendering the little mind to the big mind. It's as simple as that. It's what you are doing is you are reconnecting the little mind to the big mind. And I say little, I don't mean that in any degrading kind of way. But I mean it in terms of how the life force, how the universal energy, which is everywhere and always flowing and inexhaustible, has actualized itself in you. And what has happened with this idea that you have of your separateness is you have disconnected yourself from it. And in the process of disconnecting yourself from it through the teachings of the tribe and through your own life experiences and your own belief that this idea of your self-importance and your individuality and your separateness is more important and has to be taken care of all the time, it has kept you from reconnecting. And it's this reconnecting process that enables you to become that which is able to manifest. And it's this surrendering process is something that I can only tell you from my own experiences and from the experiences of people I have worked with over the years and my own family members and things like that. It is only something that you can come to know through trusting in it. You're not going to get it because I say it or because you read it someplace. there will still be, because it still constitutes a belief. It still constitutes something coming from outside of you, and that always comes to you with an element of doubt. You have to know how to make contact, and that's what I want to talk about here. This principle of making contact. If you were to examine the physical domain and what it is like, the world of matter, the world of particles, the world of beginnings and ends, the world of form and dimensions, and size and weight, measurement, all of the stuff that we notice about each other and about ourselves and about our world, you would come to certain conclusions about this world. When you go to India, where I'll be in December this year with Deepak, you meet these people, and when they refer to people like Nisargadatta or Ramana Maharshi or even Mahatma Gandhi, or they refer even to people such as Jesus Christ or Buddha or Yogananda or Vivekananda, they are often referred to in these revered terms that mean they are non-dual beings. Non-dual beings. And that's how they are referred to, as someone who has transcended the duality. So that's one of the things that I would like to have you take a look at here in this program or in this seminar, is how do you become a non-dual being? If you look at the physical world and all that is in it, that it is a world of duality. If it was always light, 24 hours a day, if it was light, we wouldn't have a concept called darkness, would we? We wouldn't know darkness. We wouldn't be able to describe darkness. We wouldn't think darkness thoughts. We would just know light. And so, in order to have light, you must have darkness in the physical domain. And everything in the physical domain is like that. It's like a wave that has a crest, and then it goes down, and it has a trough, and there's a top and a bottom, a nadir and a zenith, whatever you want to call it. There is this top of the wave and the bottom of the wave, and they are always separate. You can always find the wave. As long as you can measure it on a scope, you can find the wave. There's a top and there's a bottom. They are always separate, and they are always together. You can't separate them. You cut it off, as thin as you can slice it, there's another wave, and there's a top and a bottom. Okay? This top and bottom notion of the physical world and all that is in the physical plane is very important to understand. It's like it symbolizes at the top of the wave is life, at the bottom of the wave is death. Life, death. They are always together. They are always separate. You can't have one without the other. If you were always happy 24 hours a day, if you were happy 24 hours a day, we wouldn't have a concept called unhappiness. In order to know something called happiness, we have to know something called unhappiness. Otherwise, it doesn't exist on the physical plane. And haven't you ever noticed that when you're really happy and things are really working out, there's usually some caca on its way, isn't there? It's just the nature of the physical plane, isn't it? I mean, you're not going to always be in that blissful highest state all the time. You're going to, when you're in the physical plane, when you're over here on the right-hand side, when you're there, you are always going to experience ups and downs, hills and valleys. Can't have a hill without a valley. Can't have a valley without a hill. Have you ever seen a person with a front who doesn't have a back? Can't be, can it? No matter how anorexic, no matter how you do it, you still turn around and there's a back, isn't there? Have you ever seen a person with an outside who doesn't have an inside? A top without a bottom? Not possible. This is the nature of the physical plane, this duality. And very often we think that the top and the bottom are enemies of each other. Like most of us in the tribe have learned that death is the enemy of life. And we become absorbed in it. And we milk it. And we have all kinds of difficulties around it. And when people die, we are traumatized. And we wail and we grieve. And we go through all of this process thinking that death is the enemy of life. whereas it isn't. It is the partner of life. You cannot have life without death. You cannot have death without life. Everything that has ever died must have what? Lived. Everything that has ever lived must die or have died. They go together. You can't have one without the other. Yet they are separate. Separate, but always together. Up and down. Good and bad. Right and wrong. Black and white. Male and female. All of it. All of the dualities. Okay? And when we begin to try to figure out a way to get out of this duality, or to be able to bring into the world of duality what we would like to be able to bring into it, we are talking about manifesting. We're talking about having it show up into our lives, what we would like to have show up. Or to get over what it is we don't like in our life, to be able to transcend it, to get past it. We're talking about figuring out a way to get to the place over here where the rules and the laws are so strong that they can alter and circumvent these rules of the dual plane.
This concludes Side A. Please fast forward and turn the tape over to continue the program on the other side.
What I would like to do is ask you at this moment to just think of something in the physical plane that could never experience darkness. Not possible for it to know darkness, could never know it, no matter how strongly you search for it. This is something in the physical plane that could never know darkness, and that would be the sun. The sun. And it's the only thing that could never know darkness. And why is it that the sun could never know darkness? Because the sun is the source of all light. Now here's the aha. Here's the eureka. Here's what 3 hours has been about. In order to transcend the duality of the physical plane, you must go to your source. You must find your source. And in the process of finding your source, you go past the rules and the restrictions and the limitations of that which is in the dual plane. And that's why they call these people who have discovered their source non-dual beings. They live in this world over here. And as a result of living in this world, they have the gift of fish and loaves. They can feed the hungry from their consciousness because they have transcended the duality of hunger and non-hunger. They have transcended the duality of healing. When I did research on and talked to some of the great kahunas, the teaching kahunas down in Polynesia, they said that healing is nothing more. These simple, very elementary kinds of healing people, they would say the reason that they have a healing capacity is because they're knowing that they have the capacity to heal is stronger than the belief that someone else has that it's not possible. And when that knowing, which is stronger than the belief that it can't, meets, it alters the rules of the physical plane. And that's why Jesus was a healer, because his knowing was connected to this city consciousness. And I've had people who have literally come to me who have such a strong faith in and believe in me, which I totally do not deserve, and I'm not interested in being, but because their knowing was so strong, they have actually been able to be healed because that knowing transcended, and they believe that it comes from me when of course it doesn't. That universal divine energy is in all things. That's why it's called universal, which means there's no place that it's not. And so healing, the Kahunas talk about the life force as being like electrical in nature. And being electrical in nature, what it does is it has an invisible kind of flow, just like electricity does. And so if you want to practice healing, I think of the healing energy as like water. Water is a symbol that is used for healing. And water, because water, if you want to get a hold of water and you try to grab it, you can't have any of it. But if you just relax and just allow yourself to enter it, you will experience it. The minute that you try to hang on to it, or demand it to do anything, or tighten your grip on it, it will elude you. And so, when you learn about healing, one of the things I have practiced in life for a long time that has kept me relatively busy has the use of water. The brain is 85% water. 85% of the cell tissue of your brain is water. And 70% of your body, the rest of your body, is water. Pain, virtually all pain, not all pain, but virtually all pain, almost all pain, is a symptom of dehydration in the system. You have migraines. I learned this from a prison doctor who didn't have anything else but water to treat his patients with. And you have a glass of water, and you ask yourself, is the pain still there? And then you take a third glass of water, 8-10 ounces of water, and then even if you have to take a fourth, by the time you've taken that fourth glass, generally speaking, you will feel the pain begin to dissipate. For people with ulcers, for people with pains located anywhere, the pain is registered through this nerve tissue, the cell tissue of the brain, which is in a state of dehydration most of the time, because most of us simply do not drink enough water. The life force, the life energy. It's just always flowing. It's inexhaustible. It's always in a state of transformation. It's what your body is made up of. It's totally what your brain is made up of. You try it the next time. And try drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water every day. Without fail. Every day. And the next time you have a pain any place, in your back, in your neck, in your toe, in your head, in your feet, in your stomach, you just try drinking water. And ask yourself, how much do I have to take before the pain goes away? The life force to flow back within you. The dehydration and pain have a very strong connection to every thought. And the place located in your body, or in the body of someone else, you can imagine electrical flow. And all this current, you have capacity to will. And on the will, you can literally put waves of healing towards on your consciousness. You mean between the pain and the thought. You visualize where you are this current. Your will. Your will in the right place. And you did, and you fill yourself with water. You find begin to dissipate 70% of the whole surface of the planet. And it meets every criteria for the description of the life force, the God force. It's in all things. And so now you figure out, how do I get to my source? And what is my source? How do I get over here to my source? And knowing that the sun cannot experience darkness because it is the source, when you talk to the great Naguals, who are referred to, the spiritual teachers in the Native American tradition, they're referred to as sorcerers. And the word sorcerer means of the source. It doesn't mean magicians and black magic and weird stuff. It means of the source. And the people who are of the source, or living at their source, are people who are in balance and in perfect health. Mentally, physically. And it's a choice every single one of you can make almost instantaneously. It's called getting into that zone. And that might be something you want to take a look at as well. That new kind of approach to weight loss, and not just weight loss, but being in the proper mood, and being energized, and needing less sleep, and feeling like you're on target, and that you're in that place that athletes call the zone, where you just can't miss, and everything just seems to be working, and everything is flowing. When you begin to balance what it is that you're putting into your system, and have an awareness of it. And so going to your source, the source over here, the sun, which is the source that doesn't allow darkness, can be thought of as silence when you are attempting to become a manifester. You are trying to go to the place that can no longer be divided. What number mathematically does that represent? zero. You go to zero. When you divide zero, what do you get? More zero. When you multiply by zero, what do you get? More zero. And there's only one zero. It's like you don't get a zero and I get a zero, and zero is zero. It is no thing. Silence is the same. Silence is the place that you go to which can no longer be divided. You don't get a separate silence from me. You don't have a separate silence. Melville said God's one and only voice is silence. In order to know God, which means in order to know that which is able to manifest, you have to go to your silence, to the place within you where you reconnect that can no longer be divided. And that's why Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. When you learn to meditate, to go get quiet, and to know God, not to know about God. Knowing about God comes from the tribe. Knowing God comes from going to your source. Going to your source means leaving the duality of the physical plane. This is all, this is what I've been leading up to. This is like, there's such an insight in this for me. It seems so crystal clear to me. I don't know if it is to you. But as I process this with my left brain, I know that it was when I began to meditate, it was when I began to no longer see myself as this physical being that I got into this space. And when you get into it and go here and know how to go here on a regular basis, virtually anything can be transcended. Today, I am a camel. You've probably heard me talk about it. I certainly wrote about it in Your Sacred Self. And I'm very honest and open about all of the areas of my life that I have had to work at and transcend. One of them has been addictions. And they were all choices. One of them has been being overweight. All choices. Nobody is overweight by accident. Food never enters your body accidentally. It's always a choice. And other things that I have worked on, I have written about over the years as I have learned this. And one of the things I learned about addictions is that over here in the physical plane, and everybody in this room has them, of one kind or another. You may not be doing cocaine at night. You may not be smoking marijuana. You may not even be drinking alcohol. But you may be smoking cigarettes, or you may be drinking caffeine or pouring that into your system, or eating sugars that are not good for you, or keeping your life and your body out of balance in one way or another by not balancing what it is that you are putting in and just being aware of that. Or you might be addicted to your past and to all of the stuff that the tribe has taught you, and you don't know how to leave that addiction. Or you might be addicted to approval or fear. But there are addictions in almost all of us who are residing over here in the physical plane. One of the things about addictions is that everything over here in the physical plane has three elements to it. Every addiction has three elements to it. There is the craver, that is you, or me, the body, that is craver. There is the craving, which is a thought, a mental process, and there is that which is craved. All three of those are over here in the physical domain. The craver, the craving, and that which is craved. And how do you transcend the duality of the physical plane? An addiction is an absence of congruence. An absence of congruence between what you think, what you feel, and what you behave. How you behave. You think one thing, someone defined addictions as never getting enough of what you don't want. Because that's the ego. Remember, the ego will always give you a new list. No matter how much you give it, there's a new list the next day. It's never satisfied. So the way that you transcend addictions is you get over here at your source. You go to your source and you observe this thing over here that is craver, craving, and craved. You look at it. You notice it. You put your attention on it. And you recognize that that's not you. Who I am is not that which is craving or a craver or... And as I begin to notice that, I shift. And as I said, I'm a camel today. And I wasn't for a good part of my life. A camel is an animal who starts his day out on his knees. And he ends his day on his knees. And he can go 24 hours without a drink. And there was a time when I didn't and couldn't. And when I played around with substances. when I fooled around with a lot of the things that I find addictive. And now, I feel so damn superior I can hardly stand myself when I'm around that stuff. I mean, you could bring it all up here, right on stage, you know, as much cocaine as you could want, and as much booze as you could want, and all of the great, you know, stuff that I used to go after, those great foreign beers, you know, that Foster's and that, all that good stuff that I used to consume. And I just, like, that's no longer me. I am the observer. I'm the witness to that. Because my teacher said, if you want to know higher awareness, if you want to get to that place, you have got to experience sobriety in your life. You can't be looking for your higher power in something external to yourself. It is the illusion of the ego. It's the idea that says, I have to have this, I have to feel good, I want to taste this, I must eat this, I must have that. And you know that as soon as you do it, you feel guilty and terrible about it, then you go ahead and do it again and again. Because the ego never, ever gives you peace. When you want to be at peace, you get over here. And being at peace means I'm at perfect health, as perfect a health as I can be at in this moment. And when I transcended my addictions in my life, I heard the voice, 4:07 a.m., never forget it, January morning. You've tried everything else. Now try me. And I was clear. When you go to your source, and you look at the demands of the ego for temporary pleasure associated with horrendous guilt and fear and anxiety, you begin to see that you no longer are that. And once you have that divine awareness that who I am is not this, you no longer opt for the choice. And you're free. The weight comes off. The addictions go away. The fear goes away. The need to have that stuff, to get high, to get past the fatigue, to have to eat in excess of what your body wants, all of that becomes just something you look at. And instead of being angry at it, you don't say to yourself, you know, I'm really going to love myself when I'm no longer fat. You don't say, I'm really going to love myself when I'm no longer an addict. What you say is, I am love. I love everything about that over there. I notice that. I witness that. I am at my source. And I want it to be as maximally functioning and happy and content as it's possible for it to be. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. And every time you go back to the ego, which says, I need that pleasure, I have to have that drink, I have to eat that extra, you go back to your source and you say, thank you, God. Thank you. I turn it over to you. And when you're turning it over to you, what you really mean is, I reconnect with you, rather than thinking I'm separate from you. It isn't like you're separate from me and I'm turning it over to you. It's like, I have believed that I was separate from it, and now I know I'm not separate from you, or anything else. And if you want to manifest a divine, healthy body, free of addictions, what you do is go to your source and reconnect with it. And it just wants you to flow with perfect health. It's so easy. It's so simple. And it's available to you right now. Carl Jung talked about the stages that we go through in our lives. And he said that the bottom stage, and these are all associated with those 4 pathways that I've been sort of in and out of all afternoon. He said the bottom stage is what he called the stage of the athlete. And this is the time in our life when our primary identification is with our physical body, what it is, how beautiful it is, how attractive it is, how strong it is, what it can do. That becomes our identity. And then he said, you move past that. And he said an interesting thing. He said, if you don't move past it, then ultimately you will get to a place where you'll have to come back. And he wasn't talking about reincarnation, but I like to. He said, it's just inevitable. that you are on a spiritual journey. And until you learn that, you'll still be struggling. And so, before I give you the other 3 stages and give you these 9 principles, all of which have been talked about already, I would like to give you a little poem that was written by Wallace McCrae, a country western singer. He said, "What is reincarnation?" the cowboy asked his friend, and his friend replied, "Well, Slim, it happens when your life has reached its end. You see, they'll scrub your neck and they'll comb your hair, then they'll clean your fingernails. Then they're going to lay you in a padded box far away from life's travails. See, you in the box will go into a hole that's been dug into the ground, and reincarnation starts in when you're planted beneath that mound. You see, the box will melt down like the dirt and you inside, and then you're just beginning on your transformation ride. Pretty soon some rain is going to come and fall upon the ground till one day on your grave a little flower will be found. Now say a horse should wander by and graze upon that flower that once was you, but now is a vegetated bough. Well, that little flower that the horse then ate up along with all its other seed becomes bone and fat and muscle, essential to the steed. Of course, all that's consumed can't be used. So some passes through, till that lays there on the ground, this thing that once was you. Now say I should wander by one day and gaze upon the ground, and I wonder and I ponder at this object that I found. It makes me think of reincarnation, of life and death and such. And I ride away concluding, Slim, you ain't changed all that much. Isn't that great? Wallace McCrae. Just want to always keep it in perspective. So you get through the athlete stage. Some do, some don't. And then you go to what he called the stage of the warrior. And this is the stage where you finally take this athletic body, this thing of yours, of beauty, this thing that you've identified with, and you take it out into the world. And what you do with it is you do what warriors do. You attempt to defeat, to conquer. You get into competition with. You set goals. You work on yourself. What's in it for me is your mantra. What are my quotas, you ask over and over again. How can I get it? And if I don't get it before somebody else gets it, then they're going to get it instead and I'll be left out. And there's an exhaustible supply of it, so I have to have my own. And there's this competition with and this division and this identifying each other and ourselves on the basis of appearances. You are a woman, I am a man. You are black, I am white. You are tall, I am short. You are old, I am young. All of the duality, all of this stuff, this division stuff that warriors do. And then as you get along on this path, you reach a place where ultimately you realize this is going nowhere. You're hanging on to this path. It's like you're standing on a precipice. And you fall. And just as you're falling, there's this rock. And you grab a hold of the rock. And you're hanging onto the rock while you're falling. And the rock represents your tribe and all of the stuff that you've been told. And you hang on to it and hang on to it and hang on to it. And then one day you realize, I don't know why I'm hanging on to this thing for. And you let go. And you realize it's not doing you a damn bit of good. You're still falling. You're still going exactly where you're going. But you're no longer encumbered by all of this stuff that you had to hang on to. And you are able to fly, and you're free. And so you transcend this need to be a warrior, to be in competition with. And by the way, this has nothing to do with age. Some get this very young, and some don't get it past the athlete stage. And the third stage is what he called the stage of the statesman. And this is the time in our lives when we stop asking the question, what are my quotas, and we begin to say, what are yours? And how may I serve? Becomes your mantra. You ask that question. And everything that you do revolves around this idea of being able to serve. And you understand that you come in with nothing, you're here, and you leave with nothing. The only thing you can do with your life is give it away. And so you begin to practice that. And as you do, you find that the stuff that you chased after when you were a warrior and when you were an athlete is now arriving in larger amounts because you're not attached to it. And your detachment from it allows it to flow. And that's what keeps the energy of manifestation going. It's the not interfering with its flow. You stop it from flowing, and you stop the process. So you become a statesman. And then ultimately, you get to the highest stage. The stage that is called the stage of the spirit. Where you finally understand that who you are is not this thing that is wearing away. It's not this dust, not this gristle and bone. It is, you learn what Jesus talked about when he said, be in this world, but not of this world, because you are not of this world. And this is not your home. And you know it. You don't just say it. And when you know it, you stop being a human being, as I've said many times, having a spiritual experience. You shift to being a spiritual being, having a human experience. And that shift allows you to do all that spiritual beings can do, all that you can do in your dream state, all that you can do when you are no longer attached to outcome. You are serving. I've always loved the story of Mother Teresa that I've told many times. When she was visiting Phoenix, Arizona, and she was going to be on station KTAR with my friend Pat McMahon, who was the morning host, DJ there. And he was interviewing her, and he said this beautiful little woman came in, and she was about 4'10", weighed about 85 pounds, had no concern about her appearances. He said she radiated out a kind of consciousness. The whole room changed just when she walked into the room, which happens when you're around people like I described earlier with Kay O'Bara and Eduarda. When you're in that place, the energy of the room changes. You feel something coming from these people. They said of Jesus that when he went to a village, just his presence in the village and nothing more would change the consciousness of those around. Just by emanating out that kind of, and I know the feeling of having been around divine souls like that. It radiates out. And she walked into the room, and she was there to speak and dedicate a homeless shelter in Phoenix. And Pat said to her when she walked in, he said, "It is such an honor to meet you, Mother Teresa." He said, "Is there anything that I can do to help you with your cause?" And she was 83 years old at the time. She's now 86. Still ministering to the poor in Calcutta on the streets at 86. And said, when they asked her what she does, she said, "I simply see Jesus Christ every day in all of his distressing disguises." And when Pat asked her if there's anything I can do, she said, "No, it was nice of you to ask." And then he said to her, he said, "Mother Teresa, we have a very large radio station here. We have 50,000 watts clear channel. We could do a lot of publicity." And she looked at him with those tired eyes and said, "We don't really need publicity. What we're doing has nothing to do with publicity." And Pat said he was stunned by her honesty and her lack of ego and ashamed of his. And he said, "Perhaps we could raise some money, do a fundraiser here for you today." And she said, "Pat, what we're doing has nothing to do with money." And then he even felt worse. And finally he almost got down on his knees and he said to her, he said, "Mother Teresa, isn't there anything that I can do for you?" And she said, "Pat, you seem so serious. There is one thing you can do." She said, "Tomorrow morning," she said, "get up at 4 a.m. and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there who believes that he's alone and convince him that he's not. That's what you can do." It's hard for me to tell that story without getting choked. The people who are lost in our culture, in our world, are really the people who've lost their spirit. You can see it in their faces. You can see they don't feel connected. You can see they feel separate. They have given in so strongly to the demands of the ego, which says you are separate from all of this, that they become addicts. They become addicted to pleasure. They become addicted to this moment. And in that process of that addiction, they've lost their connection like the drop of water loses it to the ocean. And it can't get reconnected. It believes that it's alone. And just helping people to reconnect. That's why AA has been so effective and nothing else in treating people with addictions. Because it teaches them to reconnect, to stop looking for your higher power out there and reconnect to it. And when you reach that highest stage, that stage of the spirit, you know. And then you understand how these principles work. And here are, as I sat down to write on Marco Island in January, here are those 9 principles. And allow you to do what you want with them. And you'll be able to read about them as they came to me. The first was very clear. It said simply, you must know that you have a higher self. And that it is separate from the ego. You just have to know it. The second says, you must trust in it. And trust is a very, very important word. You can't just know it and say, oh, that's okay. Now you have to say, I know that when I trust in myself, I'm really trusting in the same wisdom that created me. That's how strong your trust has to be. In other words, when I trust in it, I'm trusting in God. Because that is something that I am connected to and not apart, not separated from. The third principle for manifesting and putting your attention on what you'd like to manifest and having it show up in your life is called understanding that you are not an organism in the environment, but that instead you are an organism/environment. You are not an organism in this environment. You and the environment are the same. If I want to describe myself as walking across this stage, and that's what I want to describe, I cannot describe this process of walking across the stage without including the stage. Can I? I cannot separate myself from it. Otherwise, it's just legs moving, and it's not walking across the stage. And I also cannot describe this experience of walking across the stage in any authentic way without describing the oxygen that I breathe as I do it, and my blood that is circulating, and all of that which is taken in by me in this process is a part of me. Most of us, through our tribal conditioning, have come to believe that who we are is an organism in the environment, and we are here to push it around and to straighten it out and to fix it. And so we push the environment around, and we cut things down, and we bulldoze. And we think somehow that our role is to control it, never ever understanding that without it, we cannot exist. We and it are the same. There is only one air. There is only one fire to keep us all warm. There are many little bonfires, but there's only one fire. There's only one water and many little glasses, but it's all the same water that we all breathe. And you could live in Afghanistan and have dark skin, and I can live as an Eskimo in Alaska. And if my heart stops working or my liver needs to be replaced, I can take your liver over there and put it in here. We all share the same organs. And I can take the vital force that flows through me and put it into any one of you, and it will keep you alive and sustain you. There is no separation between us and each other and us and all that is in this environment. And if you understand this, you simply understand, I use a metaphor in the book of a plum tree. And if you look at a plum tree and you say, okay, what part of the plum tree is not plum? Like if you take a pit and put it in the ground, and then watch as the little shoots come out, and then the little shoots turn into a tree, and then the tree has bark on it, and then the bark will form around the tree, and the tree will then develop branches, and then the branches will have leaves, and then the leaves will produce blossoms, and the blossoms will produce pits, and the pits will produce plums, and the plums will have meal in them, and they will also have skin around them. What part of that is not plum? And where do these plums come from? Another planet? And you looked at that, you'd say, wow, the damn thing just plums. It just plums. And you would see that it's a verb, not a noun, that there are no nouns. That's only what we learn in school with our discipline and our wisdom. Everything is constantly changing and in action. And we don't say, well, here's how it works. There is a spiritual world, a spirit world, called plum essence. And plum essence is over here. And it's not in the physical world. And then something magical happens, and the plum essence, spirit, turns into plum particles. From the world of plum spirit essence comes plums. And lo and behold, we have something coming from that world into this world, and plums literally come from another world. We don't say that, do we? We simply say, it's all one. Every aspect of it there's a oneness. There's a combination. Same thing is true of you. If you stood back as an observer and watched the planet, and watched the vegetation, and watched the water, and watched the rain, and watched it over millions of years, billions of years, and just watched it, you would say, the damn thing just peoples. It just peoples. But we don't do that. We need to carve it up. We need to say, there is a spirit world. And out of this spirit world comes people. But you don't come from another world. You grow out of this one. The only one there is. And that thing that we call the spirit world is not separate from this world. Any more than plums show up from the spirit world of plums. It's all connected. It's all one. And you can't function without it. Now, once you know that you are not a organism in the environment, but instead you're an organism, all one. Once you know this, then you know that everything you would like to manifest is also in this environment, and it also shares the same intelligence, the divine essence, that you share. You can't be separate from it. You can't describe it separate. So now you have the third principle. It's already here, and it's in me, and it's in that. And I'm not disconnected from it. And then the fourth principle is one that I call the principle of attraction. You know within you that you have the power to attract what you process or perceive to be missing from your life. You have the power to have it show up in you. That is something called energy, which flows through everything. It's the same energy that allows the planets to stay in their orbit, that allows a star to fall across the sky, also allows a thought to cross your mind. It's all the same energy. The same energy that spins the planet and moves it and makes the waves and allows for the tides to come in and to leave. That same energy that controls all of the fluids on this planet also controls you and all the fluids that you are, which is all that you are. And you have more than just this divine force within you. You have the energy to bring things to the place that you are in your life. You have that, and you have to know that. And then the fifth principle simply says, I know that I am worthy of receiving that which I would like to attract. The minute that you feel that you're not worthy of having it show up in your life, you stop the flow. You go from unconditional love to conditional. And that's why I spent an hour earlier this afternoon on being God. Because once you know that you are what God is doing, then you know that that is very worthwhile indeed. There's no mistakes there. There's nothing that is of not value, of no value. And so, understanding your worthiness and accepting that what shows up in your life you are entitled to, and knowing that life is not only giving, but it is receiving. And so I am willing to receive the abundance of the universe. Every time you take a breath, you participate in the receiving and giving of the life force. Watch. Receive. You got to give it back, or you die. Receive, give back. Receiving and giving. It's the way of the universe. And you have to be worthy of it. And then the sixth principle is the principle of unconditional love. It is understanding that this life force and this energy is not have any conditions on it, and it is in harmony with everything else. That the very flow of energy inside every cell of your being is something, the glue that holds it all together is this thing called unconditional, compassionate love. And you have to have the same love for it as God has for you. The same love and the same patience. And the seventh principle I call sounds have power. There are two forces at work here, two dimensions. There's the etheric dimension, which is the dimension of thought, and there's the dimension of form. And sound is the intermediate dimension between them. And that's what this CD is all about. Practicing the sound of God. Using the sound. This is what I was taught by Guruji. Use the sound of ah. The sound that you make that requires no effort. Ah. And when you make the sound of ah, what you do is you do it with effortless perfection. You don't have to move your lips, you don't have to move your jaw, you don't have to move your teeth, you don't have to move your tongue. As you watch my mouth right now, every time I make a sound, I am moving my teeth or my lips or my jaw or my tongue. When I stop doing that, and stop working, and take in a breath, and move nothing, ah is the only sound that I can make. It's the sound that's in the name for the Creator in every language. God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, Yahweh. The list goes on and on and on and on. Someone sent me the 1,000 names of God, and all of them have the sound of ah. Wherever you go, and you repeat that sound as I explain on this CD, and practice it in the morning and practice it in the evening, and I guarantee it. The eighth principle is called the principle of detachment, or infinite patience. In A Course in Miracles, there's this wonderful quote. It says, infinite patience produces immediate results. And that seems like such a paradox to our egos and our left brains. But let me explain it to you very quickly what it means. It says, when you know that you are infinitely patient, you relax in peace. You let go, and you know that you have to have the same patience with God that God has always had with you. And the minute that you do, you are at peace. You're at peace. The minute that you detach and let go and say, okay, I now know